I hear too much talk about, oh, what can we do with AI? Ask not what you can do with AI. Ask what AI can do for the mission of your organization. In every successful solution, there is an ounce of AI inspiration and tons of conventional IT perspiration.
The principles that's going to greatly enable this is based upon three things, three simple things. Code to source, source to a pipeline, pipeline to delivery of evocation in a container namespace. It's that simple.
We have one project that we're particularly excited about, and that is for the potential that it can scale across services as well as platforms, and that's using AI and machine learning for predictive maintenance.
And so when you look at all the data that's available to us now to use as input into these, whether they're neural nets or deep learning for artificial intelligence, I see a huge shift. We're able to ask questions beyond, yes/no questions, but you're able to look across varying complexity and try to pull out patterns across disparate data sources.
As a matter of fact, I would consider the prevalence and proliferation of AI, whether it be artificial intelligence as you know it, or more robotics automation or RPA, it becomes part of our fabric.
We do need to recognize that this is a revolution in technology, and it is a revolution perhaps in the human existence as a whole.
All right. Good morning, and welcome to our Artificial Intelligence and Robotic Process Automation CXO Tech Forum. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Michael Hoffman, and I'm the president of GovernmentCIO Media Research. GovernmentCIO Media Research is the online destination for thought leadership and research focused on the transformation of government IT. Our experienced team collects the best practices and research regarding the advancing technology and management landscape. On behalf of my team, I want to thank you for choosing to spend your morning with us. And hopefully you got to meet some of them this morning walking around and getting to check out the pretty incredible views here at the International Spy Museum. We're extremely excited to have so many government and industry, AI, and RPA leaders join us this morning, both as speakers, but also here at the tables here. We have a great audience that has joined from government as well as industry. We're especially excited about our lineup of speakers, with that said. We have a great lineup of folks from federal agencies and organizations such as GSA, Veterans Affairs, Health and Human Services, Johns Hopkins University, DoD, as well as the Department of Labor. The inspiration for this morning's event was the unlimited potential, but also challenges that the government is trying to balance with AI and RPA. They're trying to harness the power, but also deal with some of the anxieties that go along with it. We wanted to tackle both based on how we selected our speakers, as well as how we put them together with the different panels and topics that we put together. Before we get started, because I want to get right to the experts there, I wanted to make a few announcements. First, we're live streaming this morning's forum. So for everybody who's tuning in at their offices or at home, good morning, and thank you for joining us. We wanted to make sure that everybody could be a part of the conversation here. So please, on social media, use the hashtag CXO Tech Forum. I also wanted to thank this morning's sponsors, Pegasystems, NetApp, Hitachi Vantara Federal, Blue Prism, and Immix Group. All played an extremely important role in making this morning possible. So just wanted to take a second if we could get a round of applause for those folks for making this happen. All right, one new item that we're going to try this morning is a bit of fun. We're going to have AI and RPA trivia throughout the morning from here until lunch. In fact, we're going to be asking 3 trivia questions throughout today's forum, and you'll be teaming up with the people at your table. So I hope you chose the people you're sitting with wisely. For each question, your table will have exactly 60 seconds to provide an answer, before my team will be collecting answers from each table. So make sure when you put the answers down as well, write down your table number. The winners will receive free tickets to the Spy Museum for each member of the table. So you'll see that we'll do those. We'll do 1 in the morning and then 2 after the networking break. They're fun, right? Team put together a good group of questions. I'm excited about them. All right, so before we get started as well, I wanted to take a moment to recognize the charity for this morning's event. For every forum that we do, we donate a portion of our ticket sales to a charity. This morning, we'll be making our donation to the Tragedy Assistant Program for Survivors. Better known as TAPS, this organization offers compassionate care to all those grieving the loss of a loved one who died while serving in our armed forces or as a result of his or her service. We recently had one of the mothers who lost her son come to our office and share her moving story of how TAPS saved her life. You can see a video of that story on our website here in the next week. Since 1994, TAPS has assisted more than 90,000 surviving families, casualty officers, and caregivers. All right. With that, I'd like to move on to our first keynote session. We are very honored to have the two co-chairs of the Congressional Artificial Intelligence Caucus, Congressman Pete Olson, representing the 22nd Congressional District of Texas, and Congressman Jerry McNerney, representing California's 9th District. So, if you gentlemen could come join me, we'll get kicked off. All right. Wonderful. All right. So Congressman McNerney has served in Congress since 2007. Along with the AI Caucus, the congressman also serves on the Committee on Energy in Congress and the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. He also shares a similarity with my wife. He has a PhD in mathematics. Congressman Olson has served in Congress since 2009. He also sits on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, along with the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. So these two spend quite a bit of time together, and are leading one of the key caucuses going forward in Congress.
Bipartisan.
We're very excited to have both to give, as they just pointed out, a bipartisan view of the way two influential members of Congress see the growth of AI and RPA in government. So why don't we kick off with the beginning? Why not? Could you gentlemen talk to me a little bit about how the Congressional AI Caucus was formed?
Well, I'll take that first. We formed this back in last Congress with a guy named John Delaney from Maryland, Democrat. He was his lead. He approached me that Congress and said, Pete, I need a Republican co-chair. And I jumped at the chance because back home in Texas, people are buzzing about AI. As I mentioned, John left Congress, and so we had to find another co-chair of his caliber. And we got way above his caliber, with all due respect. Jerry came on board for this Congress. And that's how it got started. We're making great progress. As you hear today, you hear a word, we'll say it over and over. You don't hear it enough in D.C. It's called bipartisan. This issue is not Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. It is an American issue, and we're together on this issue. So that's how it started. And any comments, Jerry, you want to add?
Well, you approached me and said, Jerry, John's leaving. He's going to be running for president. And so I need someone on the Democratic side. And I thought, AI is so dynamic and so electric. And people, as Pete mentioned, back home in California, people are all abuzz about it. When you have an AI forum or something, people they'll come to hear about it. They want to participate in the biggest city in my district, Stockton, California, has an AI strategy. It's the first city in the country, maybe in the world, to develop its own AI strategy. So certainly it was a no-brainer to get onto this one.
Okay.
And I appreciate your reaching out to me, Pete.
A lot of hand-holding. I like it. So what are some of the goals that you've laid out for the caucus after starting it? What are some of those major, maybe milestones that you're looking to accomplish as part of it?
Well, I think the big thing that I would like to accomplish is just to get more people in the Congress familiar with what artificial intelligence is. I mean, it means a lot of different things to different people. And so we have forums, we have meetings. And the interesting thing is, when you're a caucus in the Congress and you have a forum, you might get your co-chair to show up if you're lucky, and maybe one other person. But when we have AI forums, we get 10, 12, 15 members of Congress, and the room is packed, shoulder to shoulder with staff members. So people want to know what this is. They want to know what the future looks like. Is it going to dehumanize society? Is it going to cost half of our American jobs? I mean, of course, it's not going to, but people want to have some assurance. And to educate members of Congress about what this means is going to be very vital to the future of this program.
Our motto is very simple: educate, then legislate. And that means education in Congress with members, with staff. As Jerry said, our first little meeting of the AI Caucus for this Congress was on what's called the Flyaway Day. Last votes before noon, people going home, the Hill is scattered, empty. The place was packed, standing room only. And as Jerry said, you hear AI all over back home. You hear it from the big people, the Texas Medical Center, largest medical center in the country, the future of AI in medicine. You hear at the Port of Houston, all the trade, the future of AI at the port. At the Johnson Space Center, humans in space, AI contributing to that effort. It's all pervasive throughout our economy. And that's why we're so excited to have this caucus, again, to get members of Congress focused on this issue so we keep the leadership, as opposed to losing it to other countries like China, who are working hard to advance their AI technologies.
So the government is, classically, everyone knows the story with DARPA and the fact that they have the investments that were made there with the innovation that pushed the internet forward, pushed computing power forward across the country. Do you see similar potential here for artificial intelligence as well as robotic process automation?
I do, for sure. I mean, again, for example, we've had meetings with, IBM had a thing called Watson, kind of like a little AI, their first sort of foray into that. And that example, one thing we'll talk about too is there's big concern about AI losing jobs. And there will be a change in jobs for sure. But we changed from with the high-tech society of the late 80s and early 90s, jobs changed, like IBM's the best example. They were all hardware, big mainframe computers. That was their business model. That model went away with smaller computers, more capacity, the cloud. And so now they've used some AI to adjust. They've almost kept the same workforce, but they've given them different jobs. Now, one other example of AI, a small example from the federal government. Raise your hand if you think our Veterans Administration is the model of efficiency in government. No one. Okay, that's consistent. The point is, it's just a small smidge of what AI can do. Their appointments are sacred. They fill up quickly. They have to do those within 90 days of a request. So if someone skips an appointment, that hurts the whole system. That means a veteran has missed a chance to have the care we promised them. Using AI, the VA set up a system where they check so-called prolific missers of their meetings. No English there, but people who skip meetings all the time. And they notice habits. If they ping this person 30 days before his appointment, he responds or she responds, they tend to come. If they don't respond, okay, we're going down a bad path. Let's hit them with a text message, an email. They can determine, okay, the patterns happened before. When this has happened, this person has not showed up. Let's get somebody on call who's close to the clinic. So if it appears the day before he's not coming, this person's on call. AI makes sure our veterans get health care with that simple thing. And that's just one smidge of what we can do with AI. I talk about energy, trade, medicine, intelligence. It goes on and on and on.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that the United States government and the government in any country really is the entity that has the wherewithal and the resources to kickstart a program like AI. And we've seen this over and over, as Pete mentioned, with NASA. We saw it with DARPA. I mean, the United States government has access to data, which is absolutely critical to artificial intelligence. And if we get the agencies of the government working in a way that promotes this and helps create opportunity, then we'll see this thing take off in a positive way. So I think it's really appropriate that the government take this on. Now, unfortunately, we're not spending enough resources right now to do the job. We need to increase the federal participation in artificial intelligence both in terms of expenditures and in terms of creating job opportunities in the government for artificial intelligence. So we have a little work ahead of us, and I think that's another reason why it's so important to have an AI caucus, have people in Congress that understand what the risks are, what the ethical challenges are, and what the rewards are. So it's a perfect balance. It's a perfect mending of minds.
And we're also concerned about all these agencies. They've got their own AI program. DOE, own program. DOD, own program. Let's talk, guys. No duplicates. Spend our taxpayer money wisely. Don't double up efforts, triple up efforts. Talk. And that's why we're trying to just break down the barriers within the government so they can talk and go forward. Because again, we're competing against foreign countries who want this technology and want to take the world over, at least with the future. And so we're working hard with this caucus to get people informed, educated, so they go help us legislate and help us make sure we all stay on one big boat and not separate boats. Baby guy, the federal government.
Well, if I could jump in there, what are some of the efforts with the caucus to, I mean, when it comes to a lot of federal agencies will say, well, we'd love to do some of these AI programs, but we might not have the budget for it. And that's where it usually comes to Congress. What has been the AI caucus's role thus far in being influential in when it comes to appropriations for making sure that agencies have the budget to do just that?
Well, for example, I've proposed an AI Government Act, and it's passed the Senate. A companion bill has passed the Senate, and the Oversight Committee has promised me that they're going to be marking that up in the House. So what that would do is create a center of excellence within the government, within the GSA, to give resources to the different government agencies that are going to be needing artificial intelligence expertise. Not only that, but it establishes a hiring track so that we can get artificial intelligence experts into the government. So it's going to do a number of things, and I think Pete has his own legislation out there. So we're going to be leading the legislative effort, and because of that, it's important that we not only communicate to you all, but that we hear from industry and academic and thought leaders on this issue as well, so that we can be informed and be on top and in front of this thing.
Again, this is a two-pronged bipartisan approach. Jerry's approach is having resources for the private sector to step out and develop AI. Our bill focuses on the federal government, sort of break down the barriers between different agencies. Set up this commission basically that looks at all the agencies and says, here's how you guys can integrate your efforts and make sure we advance AI technology. And again, we need your help as well, because you guys are the ones who make this work. It's not us. The private sector has done all these innovations with our help. And so we need your help to tell us, this is what we need. There's some issues out there we hear about, all kinds of things. Sometimes we don't. This term called unintended consequences is nasty term. If we talk with you, that's what Jerry and I are doing, we can avoid some of those consequences and step out and go forward.
And again, I want to point out, this is bipartisan. Not only Pete and I are friends, but we're working together, and we don't see that partisan rift on artificial intelligence. And you can just tell by what Pete said. He said, Jerry, the Democrat, is working in the private sector, and Pete, the Republican, is working in the public sector, which it seems like a role reversal. So we're working together to make this happen, and things are starting to move. But again, we have a long ways to go. We need to make sure that the resources in the federal government are there. We can't let ourselves fall behind on this one. This is too important.
Okay. You mentioned the private sector and the industry. What are some of the bridges that maybe the AI caucus can provide to maybe making those introductions? You mentioned workforce. There's some certain initiatives and programs out there, such as the U.S. Digital Service come to mind, of bringing some of those experts into the federal agencies. What are some of those programs and initiatives that you see where those bridges can be provided?
Well, the big thing you mentioned, the job issues. That's a huge issue for Jerry and I. Every transition we've had from the Industrial Revolution, the technology revolution, jobs have changed. And people are concerned about losing their jobs. And that's a valid concern. So we're trying to adjust, let them know, I know it's a change, and change is different, but don't be afraid. One example of how a private sector company is trying to do the transition, Amazon.com is working on some new AI within their own sphere. But they're changing jobs now. People are losing jobs, but they keep them on site and retrain them for the next AI job. So there's no job loss. There's no fear of losing your job. And we have to try to control that fear too, because some smart people. Who's heard of Elon Musk or Stephen Hawking? When AI comes up, they say Armageddon, the destruction of society. Whoa. Whoa. That's not what this is about. These machines will never become humans. They won't think per se, reason. They use algorithms, programming. We control what they'll do. We have to work on our biases. We have natural human biases and keep those out of the programs. Example of biases, we heard I'm from Texas. How many of you think I have cowboy boots on? I do.
There you go.
Valid. How many of you think I ride a horse to work every day? I don't.
Get through traffic a little bit faster, maybe. I don't know.
How many people think I have an oil well in my backyard? Not even close. But those are biases, and we all have them. They're just natural. We have to work to recognize them and not let them get into our program or efforts, because that is not good.
Do you anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, and I just want to follow up. The employment challenge is significant, but there's a lot of nuance to it. It's not like artificial intelligence is going to wipe out jobs. What happens is that any job has aspects to it that will be susceptible to be replacement by artificial intelligence, but aspects to the job that are not. And so it's important to sort of understand what those two are and use the parts that are not susceptible to replacement by artificial intelligence and weave those in to new opportunities that are going to be presenting themselves with respect to artificial intelligence. So it's really a significant challenge, but I just look at it as a significant opportunity. But I do want to make sure that the people back home in my district have those advantages, that they're not the ones that are going to be put aside when artificial intelligence makes its grand entry into the everyday workforce.
Okay. How do you see this view of AI and RPA? I mean, we have a great collection of folks working with it in federal government here. Where do you see it going in the next 5 years in terms of the views of Congress? Do you see that same level of interest remaining where your caucus, like you said, is getting those level of participation?
I see the interest only growing. I mean, there's the public sector, there's the agencies that are going to need to have AI expertise. That is going to continue to grow. And then there's the private sector, not only in terms of job concerns, but also what resources does the private sector bring to the federal government in terms of products, in terms of services. So there's going to be a continuing growth in this. And it could be transformative. I mean, we could see the medical, the healthcare industry transformed by artificial intelligence. We could see our cities transformed. We could see transportation and our electrical infrastructure. I mean, all these things have a tremendous opportunity with the synergy that we're starting to see happen.
And the great thing about AI is it's way beyond elections and politics. I mean, this is truly bipartisan. This will survive the elections coming up next November. I'm leaving Congress after this term. It'll survive my departure. I mean, it's very important, and people know that. I mean, back home, you can see TV ads, billboards, AI, AI, AI. I come back from the airport. First thing I get off the plane, big poster for AI. My point is, it's not going anywhere. And also, if two guys like Jerry and me can attract a crowd on a flyaway day, you know this is something valuable.
Very important. We have a little bit of time for questions. If anybody has, I have one more question. We're going to get the microphones for everybody. That's something we want to do throughout this morning, is really incorporate the audience. So, yeah, Frankie, the microphones are over here. But yeah, but before we get to that, could we talk a little bit more about the AI and Government Act that was put forth? What do you see some of the results of that coming together with that legislation?
Well, I see the government developing the AI capabilities that we need. I see that as the first step. That's not the end of the program, but we're going to be making sure that the government agencies have the resources and have the personnel that they need to serve the mission of that agency. That's what I see as, and as Pete mentioned, the efficiency of the Veterans Administration could be a thing, a concern about the efficiency, could be a thing of the past. So those are the things I see using this new, I don't even want to call it technology, but this new transformation impacting.
And this is so far ahead of our efforts in the private sector, for example. In Houston, we're very proud of our big cancer center, MD Anderson. They were using Watson with IBM. You might have heard they pulled out, they couldn't do it, didn't work. It didn't work because they weren't ready for it. They were behind. AI was ready to go. They just couldn't adapt to all this new information, all this new processing. And so that's why Jerry and I are making sure we educate people and give them resources to get on board and not get scared and bail out, because it is scary, but it's the future.
Right. Do we have any questions? Right here, sir.
I think I'm on. Okay, great. Excellent job, and really like the name of the bill because there's a meetup in town called AI Government Meetup, so I appreciate that. My question has to do about laws and regulations around autonomous vehicles, and any thoughts about that, especially around maybe issues of liability or any regulations on safety, maybe levels of autonomy, because things are starting to move pretty quickly down that path.
Well, we have marked up an AI, an autonomous vehicle bill in the last Congress. I think we're probably going to be doing something like that again. And the thing is, we know more now than we did in the last Congress, so we'll have a better informed legislative proposals at that point. But I think you're right. The liability issue is going to be probably front and center on that whole effort. But we also want to make sure that the technology is where it needs to be. I mean, I'm obviously not that young of a man, and I'm looking forward to having autonomous vehicles before they take my driver's license away. And so this is something that I'd like to see happen expeditiously. But you know, artificial intelligence isn't this, it's not this overwhelming thing. I mean, it allows you to determine whether this is an image of a cat or a dog, or it allows you to determine if that's a pedestrian or a cat or a piece of paper on the road. I mean, these are very small slices of knowledge, of actionable information that is developed by artificial intelligence. And so for autonomous vehicles, you have to slice thousands or even hundreds of thousands of little tiny pieces of knowledge together in order to have a successful product. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'd like to see that move forward expeditiously, and I think my colleagues do too.
Yeah, Jerry mentioned had a bill get through the House last Congress that was not acted upon the Senate that got a start on this autonomous vehicles, and that is our future. And I'm excited about that because being a veteran, and our kids are coming back home now alive. They had died in the battlefield 20 years ago. We're so good in the battlefield. They come back all burned up, all broken up. They'll never drive again, and that's mobility is a part of living, coming back. These cars can give them their mobility. My mother-in-law just had 2 strokes the past year, and now she fell and broke her hip. She's never going to drive again. We have to pick out our avocados, take her to the grocery store, because she has to squeeze them with her hands. She can't trust us to pick out avocados. My point is, she can get a car, take her, she can go by herself, get her avocados, live her life like she lived it before because this vehicle could take her. Also, I've got a teenage daughter's 22 and a son about to turn 21. They're drinking alcohol. Sometimes when I was that age, I overdid it. And we drove home. Stupid. Now they can drive home in the vehicle. And as Jerry mentioned, we've got to work on technology, but it's coming online. For example, one small smidge what cars are telling. My sister was in the hospital in Tennessee 2 years ago. I dropped down to see him, drove my sister's car, this brand new BMW SUV, and the steering wheel just kept vibrating on and off. I told my sister, Chris, your car's broken already. It's got some rattle in the steering column. She said, no, it's tracking the lanes of the road. You get close to one of the lanes, it vibrates to tell you you're drifting. It's like, holy cow. This thing can read the paint on a highway. Wow. And that's what AI can do in autonomous vehicles. And that's why Jerry and I are working so hard to make sure we step out and not be afraid to step and make the right decisions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think that's all the time that we have. Thank you both for joining us. And if I could get a round of applause for the two congressmen, I really appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you very much.
This weekend, big football game, Army versus Navy.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Go Navy! Beat Army.
Well, next weekend.
Go Army, beat Navy, folks.
Well, thank you very much, both gentlemen. Thanks. Yes.
We're
All right,
bipartisan
ready?
except for that, right?
Next weekend. All right. We're going to have our next panel come up here in a second. But before we do that, while we move add a few chairs to the stage, we're going to do our first trivia question. So, quick review. I'm going to ask the question, and then you're going to have 2 minutes, I would say, to jot down your answer. You can see the sticky pads in the middle. Write down your answer and the table number, and then members of my team will come grab them real quick, and we'll announce the winner at the end of this panel session. All right, so without delay, our trivia question, this is going to be, if you are a Jeopardy fan, you're going to have an advantage here. So the question is, how much money did IBM supercomputer Watson win on Jeopardy? The total number. Okay? That's everything. All right. All right. Do. Is that Jeopardy? Yes. No Googling. Just remember that. Closest answer wins. We're going to likely have only one winner. All right. All right, you guys ready? Aaron, you want to pick them up? Chris, over there? All right. While they're picking them up, why don't we introduce our second panel to the stage? Our first panel. Our first panel discussion is going to be focused on platforms and digital assistance, and focusing on the investments that the federal agencies are making. It's going to be moderated by Peter Kinch, our Director of Platforms over at GovernmentCIO. And along with him, he's going to be joined by Commander Alex Holston, Chief Medical Informatics Officer, Defense Health Management Systems, Dr. Gil Alterovitz, Director of AI for Veterans Health Administration, and then, well, she goes by Dr. P by quite a few people, Dr. Pragnismita Nayak, Chief Data Scientist for Hitachi Vantara Federal. So, please, after you.
All right. Thank you, Michael, and welcome everyone. Thank you, panelists. I'm going to ask each of you to briefly just kind of introduce yourself to the group, and then we'll jump into it. So I'll start with you, Gil.
Hi, my name's Commander Alex Holston. Just Alex is great. I'm a Chief Medical Informatics Officer, currently working at DoD's Healthcare Management Systems Modernization Program Management Office here in Roslyn, Virginia. I'm also a neonatologist at Walter Reed.
All right, great. Gil?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Gil Alterovitz. I'm Director of Artificial Intelligence, and I'm over at the Department of Veteran Affairs, focusing on research and development. Happy to be here.
Dr. P.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Pragnismita Nayak. I'm called Dr. P. I'm a Chief Data Scientist with Hitachi Vantara Federal. I have over 20 years of experience with software development and artificial intelligence. Machine learning was my PhD thesis topic, and I enjoy it, so I'm still on with. Glad to be here. Look forward to this.
All right, great. I'm going to actually start with a question I'm going to ask each of you in turn. And that's basically just give me a flavor, give me a feeling for where you're seeing the most success with AI and what that looks like in terms of platforms and how it's being developed and stuff like that. I'll start with you, Dr. P.
Sure. So as I said, like I have been working with AI for over 20 years now, and or rather I've been working with the subdomain of machine learning. And looking at any kind of problem, if there is sufficient data and there are questions which cannot be theoretically answered or empirically answered, that's a place where we can always look at the existing data and see if there is a potential for machine learning with it. So where there's data and there's a good question to be answered or there's an answer you're looking for, that's where I can see a machine learning potential application there.
Okay, great. And Gil, in terms of your work with the VA and things like that, what's working great for you?
Yes, so I think we're seeing several different application areas in the VA. So one of the ones that we're investing is trustworthy AI. So AI that you can make sure that you can trust in terms of not having biases. One that can be useful in terms of explaining the data, so you can explain the results of the model to the patient, to the physician, as well as AI that is scalable. So we have the largest integrated healthcare system in the country, and end up training more than 70% of physicians go through training at the VA at one point or another. So there's a lot of opportunities for engagement, and being able to scale is a really important problem. So platforms that enable those characteristics are ones that we're particularly interested in.
Okay, cool. And Alex?
I'm going to take a slightly different approach to answer that question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
We believe it's not about the IT. It's not about artificial intelligence. It's about the patient in front of us. And where we're seeing a lot of benefit, at least within the medical side of the Department of Defense, is allowing that space between the physician and the patient to shorten by using AI to do the stuff in the back behind the physician, rather than having the physician have that electronic health record between them and the patient. So by putting the patient in the center of the engagement of where we're seeing a lot of benefit, it's been helpful on the DoD healthcare side. So what do I mean by that? What's examples of that? So an example of that would be, let's let our pathologists spend a little bit less time screening slides by having imaging that can highlight where they think cancer might be on the slides, so they can spend more time talking to the provider. Let's automate some of the processes, which traditionally we don't think of artificial intelligence doing for us. We think of it answering questions for us. But why don't we have it automate the simple stuff so that your physicians can spend more time on the higher cognitive stuff and actually talk to their patients again, rather than having the electronic health record between them and the patient.
Cool. That sounds awesome. So the next question I have is that a lot of organizations, AI is, an evolving technology, obviously getting a lot of, attention nowadays. How are you seeing, or in terms of on-ramping, agencies getting started with AI? How would you advise them to jump into that? And I'll start with you, Gil, on that question.
Okay. So we're looking at a number of different approaches there. One is my team's been working on developing a number of these AI playbooks as a way to see what are the steps toward having an agency work toward having pilots first, and then doing different opportunities in terms of either acquisitions or developing in-house, and then further scaling up. So Playbooks is sort of one approach that we're looking at as an on-ramp. And there are about 3 playbooks. Feel free to come talk afterwards to explain the different playbooks and what they mean and how they're different. And then there are these tech sprints. AI tech sprints are a way that we are looking as an on-ramp by engaging with industry, with academia and others around some open data that we make. And we make that open data available, and during approximately a 3-month sprint, which we just finished, there's going to be a demo day with the Department of Commerce December 10, where someone will present the results. We're able to see how companies go about using AI and developing tools, and that is a potential on-ramp toward future development as well.
Okay. Would either of you like to add to that?
Sure. We often get 2 types of questions. One is that we have so much data, can you help us come up with a machine learning application for it? And the other case is we have this problem, can machine learning help us here? Or we don't know what the problem is, can machine learning help us here? So that's like, I added a third question there. So what we do often is we try to get an understanding of what are the specific answers the stakeholders are trying to answer, and based on that, trying to go back and see if there are matching data sets available which can help answer that question. If not, can that data be collected in some form? So trying to get that gap between what is the answer that they're trying to solve, and I'm strategically not using the word problem here. I'm saying we are looking for answers rather than looking for problems here. So what is the end goal that a particular stakeholder or an agency is trying to get at, and then trying to bridge the gap between the data that is available and the kind of processes and algorithms that can be used to address that problem.
Okay. And Alex, anything you'd like to add? Or?
Well, I would advise approaching it the same way that Department of Defense has, in terms of how as you and an agency approach creating your own AI or artificial intelligence platforms. And what the DoD elected to do is not put all the ideas in the Pentagon, rather just create a center that allows people to engage with them in a platform where you can bring your ideas to the center and then execute them. So let me say that with a little bit more detail. So the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center is currently under the J6 or the J6 equivalent at the Pentagon, where cybersecurity becomes the first and foremost important part. So you have to have a secure platform, at least when you're operating within the federal government, I feel, when you're analyzing large amounts of data. And then they did a very important thing, at least within the health part of it, led by Captain Hassan Teta. They said, we're not going to have the ideas. We're not going to sit there and ask the questions and find the answers. We're just going to simply create the platform where you can bring your data, have it analyzed by big computers, big power computing for you, and then get your own answers. Because if you centralize both the platform and the ideas, I think your agency will lead to failure. If you centralize the platform, but then have a distributed, I call it, and there's not a better name for it, just a distributive idea network, let the ideas be spread out, then I think you have true power of artificial intelligence. I find the best ideas typically, and I know I'll get in trouble for this, don't come from Washington, D.C. And I live in Washington, D.C., so I'm allowed to say it. But they come from the nurses and the doctors out there in Seattle, Washington. They come from the doc in Germany who's trying to figure out how to do international care and transport a patient back to the U.S. People that are on their feet in the front lines and on the deck plate taking care of patients day by day. I want to hear what their ideas are and then provide them the platform to research those ideas with artificial intelligence.
All right, great. So next question. I mean, obviously a lot of momentum behind AI, but what kind of barriers and what kind of resistance have you found in the introduction of AI? What kind of things are people bringing to the fore that they're concerned about or worried about or things like that? And I'll start right here to my left with you, Alex.
The barrier came, and I'll just give the example of our first reach into AI, if I may,
sure.
At DIMSUM, which is where I work. The biggest barrier is people had no idea what we were doing. And I had to explain to my boss what our data science team was accomplishing for us. So our mission, our first step, and to answer the previous question again, so not only centralized platforms, but also just start. Mm-hmm. So we didn't know where to start as a PMO. We had a data science team, and we decided to start with natural language processing. And that's not sophisticated artificial intelligence at all, but it had started the conversation. And our challenge was, how do we deploy Cerner, our electronic health record, with 4,000 corrections and enhancements, and turn that into a message that we can give to providers at the deck plate or at the front line, so they know what's about to happen when all of a sudden on Friday they come into work, their electronic health record works one way, and on Saturday when they come into work, all of a sudden 4,000 changes have been made to their electronic health record. So we use data science, artificial intelligence via a primary natural language processing to examine all of those 4,000 corrections. Cerner had put a page-long summary of what each of those corrections and enhancements were. So there was a page of data for each of them. So rather than take the time of having a person read through each of those corrections and enhancements, we created a very simple vector of topic modeling to look at what those topics would be. And we came up with 7 topics. And then I was so excited, and I presented it to my leadership, and they were like, that means nothing to me. They were like, great. You know what our topics were? So we looked at 4,000 corrections and enhancements, and our topics were date time, server, and I believe the other one, and let me just make sure I get it right, was dialog box. So I can't take that message to the front line and say, hey guys, you're about to get a change in your electronic health record, and we're changing time, date, dialog box, and server. So I think that step that we're missing in that barrier, I like the work that's being done in contextual AI. I don't know if we'll have time to really discuss that and get into it, but it's one thing to be able to analyze a massive amount of data, but until that can be contextualized to senior leadership, it didn't really go anywhere, and it stalled out, and all that hard work kind of stalled. Now, we did some other stuff later that maybe I'll have time to speak about with that data and with that natural language processing, but I think the biggest barrier is how do we translate what we found to the people that are supposed to benefit from it?
Gil, anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure. Well, yeah, I agree with a lot of those points, and certainly even defining what AI is for people, is sort of can help the ball start rolling as people start to decide about what investments they want to make in AI. I think maybe I'll bring one, a list of barriers, because we try to actually make a list of barriers, and we're going to publish those out from the AI Tech Sprint, where we engaged different companies and organizations around making tools with AI around some open data that we had. And we learned a number of interesting things. For example, one of the tools was to empower and enable 9+ million veterans to match with clinical trials and experimental therapeutics that could match for them, as well as 50+ million CMS beneficiaries, some of which are veterans as well. And what we learned from that is that there was actually an NLP, a natural language processing component, and the modeling that was done for that actually was unable to learn some things like, for example, a number. It had like a million. Imagine a number of million has commas. It started parsing the commas as if it's like 1 and then like a 0 and then, not like a 1 million. So like really simple things that for us seem like common sense. These models by major commercial entities that people are using every day, we are able to provide them input so that this will affect how machine learning and AI will be used for millions of people, not just this clinical trial application. So a lot of things where basically common sense is you gain that from interacting with other people and seeing how the models can be changed, and then getting them better one step at a time.
Okay. And throw it down to you.
Sure. I totally agree with both your statements, and those are definitely roadblocks and challenges that we face in our day-to-day discussions and interactions in defining the problem and coming up with solutions. One thing that I have seen more often is that often the data is not available. The data is available, but then it's not available in the right format. You don't have the good collection of data that is relevant to a given problem. So there's certain thought process that needs to go even before we start delving into solving a problem, trying to figure out what are my key. Before you start cooking, you want to see, do you have all the ingredients or not? So similarly, when we get into creating a platform, we need to make sure that, do I have my key data sets and ingredients or not? And it's often a challenge in trying to even go across divisions within an agency and trying to get that data together, which would make sense to solve a problem. So there's a human problem in the data problem as well.
Okay. All right. Great. So we've kind of focused a lot on the actual interactions and the AI, interactions in the back office and things like that. But the next question I want to kind of put out there is areas where AI is actually, improving direct interaction with citizens, with patients, with, where the AI is actually interacting directly with them. And I'll start with you, Dr. P.
Sure. So we recently worked on a cyber exercise, and we were trying to understand as to when there were network issues, what was causing it. Was it because a system stopped communicating, or was it because there was some issue in the network itself? So getting all that data together and making it easy for the network engineers, the system analysts to figure out, hey, there's a problem. I didn't expect this particular protocol's communication to be happening. So we automated that. Definitely an expert network engineer can find that with other tools, but having a platform which alerts them, notifies them that we are seeing these anomalies and actions need to be taken, just highlighting stuff for them, that's crucial and a big time saver.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm getting a signal from the back of the room that we are actually getting very close to the end. So what I'm going to do now is just ask if each one of you, has any final thoughts that you want to put out there for everyone, and I'll start with Gil.
Well, I think right now is a really exciting time for veterans, for the public. There's a lot of opportunities to help the veterans, and in doing so also helping the public, which may be the caregivers, family around them, and so forth. And the opportunity is really there because, as I mentioned before, it's the largest integrated healthcare system, but also has unique assets like the largest genomic database in the world linked to healthcare data, 800,000. And so together, I think by working together, we can really make a big difference for our veterans by leveraging AI around special veteran and other priority areas. So that's what we're doing now, trying to interact with and see what those veteran priorities are by interacting with different partners. So if people have ideas or want to engage, now is the time that we're looking to do that. And it's a really exciting time, frankly. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm very excited also. The charter for the Federal Electronic Health Record Modernization Office was signed this past week. And that means we're finally looking at things federally. That's DOD, VA, Department of Homeland Security, all putting their patient data in one central location, all using the same tenant where we can get those big data sets and start answering those questions. It's going to require, obviously, a lot of thought to data privacy and other issues when you bring that much data together. Who gets to look at that data? But I want to finish with an idea that we need to make sure we're putting the patient at the center. Your last question really challenged me, because when I'm looking at the projects that we've initiated on the DoD healthcare side, a number of them are, how are we going to make physicians better? I think we need to put the patient at the center and ask the patient, what is it you need artificial intelligence to do, and then go from there. Alex Holston, the neonatologist, I need an early warning system for sepsis, and we're doing a lot of great work combining the best and brightest from the DoD and VA to come up with the algorithms for sepsis to identify that in patients before they get septic. Alex Holston, the person, needs artificial intelligence to tell me when to stop eating pumpkin pie. Like, that's what I need. I need the handheld to come up with an alert that says, hey, it's Thanksgiving. Remember last Thanksgiving when you had too much of your sister's pumpkin pie? Why don't you eat less this year? And if we could get the patient at the center of our artificial intelligence initiatives, I think we really have an opportunity here.
And finally, Dr. P, beyond pumpkin pie, what can you wrap up with?
I think that the buck stops there, I guess. But yes, I mean, there's a lot of interesting data problems out there, and there are a lot of interesting tools, but it's all about trying to combine them together and coming up with really interesting solutions. And it's an iterative process, and we're always looking for good, interesting problems so that we can reap the benefit of all these algorithms and all these cloud infrastructure and everything that is available to us, maximize the benefit from it.
All right, great. At this point, we're going to wrap up the panel here. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each of the panelists. It's been great, and I hope very informative for our audience. It's certainly been informative to me. Thank you for joining us, and we'll move on to the next panel. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So you're stuck with me for another couple of minutes here, but at this point, I'd like to hopefully welcome. I'd like to welcome Nolan Greene, who's joining us from Pega Systems. Pega is one of the sponsors for this event today, and Nolan is going to come up here and give me an industry perspective. So, Nolan, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Excellent. So, as I said, Nolan is here from Pega Systems, and to kick this off, I'll just start out by saying, Nolan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Nolan Greene. I'm product marketing lead for robotic automation at Pegasystems. I've been with the company for about 2 years, and have been advising organizations on digital transformation for about the last 7 years. Was previously an analyst at IDC.
All right, excellent. So, Nolan, in terms of thinking about robotics and AI, I know that one of the challenges, and we've kind of covered this, in the panel so far, is that government is asking to improve its efficiency and become more citizen-focused and things like that. But of course, there is the challenge associated with the large quantity of legacy technology that obviously exists in government organizations and things like that. How do you feel AI and robotics can be applied to resolve these challenges?
Sure. So I'll start with robotic automation, or RPA. Given that there are a lot of legacy systems in government, and just as there are in other sectors, RPA is a really great technology for bridging the gaps that exist between those systems. If you're trying to build a new, improved process from start to finish, and you have these legacy systems that you can't retire, that you can't divest, but they don't have APIs to talk to the other systems needed to get to an outcome, RPA is a really good way to bridge those gaps. And if you do RPA right, you can bridge those gaps in such a way that when those APIs become available, you can swap out that robotic automation for an API and continue to modernize your process.
All right, great. So when you think about AI and robotics, where do you see the best application of each of these technologies?
Sure. So I'll talk to each one separately. RPA is for tasks that are really high volume, low complexity, rules based, and can't be automated via AI or APIs or any other more modern automation technique. And it's not just about being high volume, low complexity, but really should fit into a larger process. AI is best used for applications such as decisioning, so taking a set of data, applying an algorithm to recommend the next best action. It also works very well in conjunction with natural language processing and text analytics to be able to take a document and do intelligent routing or automate a common service agent task. Also, we see a lot of value for AI and operational intelligence, collecting data, for example, on clicks and keystrokes on the employee desktop, and finding patterns and making process optimization recommendations based on that data.
Okay, so those all sound like great applications there. Any warnings or caveats that you want to put out there for those kind of technologies?
Sure. So for RPA, I hear a lot of excitement about automating really tedious rote work, which is really a huge sweet spot for RPA. But just because a process can be automated via RPA, because it's rules-based, because it's low to no complexity, doesn't mean it's a good use case. You really have to consider the volume of the task over weeks, months, and quarters. What is the return on investment from automating this particularly tedious task versus the investment in building your automations, deploying the necessary VMs, and getting people trained to manage RPA. So I see that mistake a lot. A lot of times there's a huge focus on tasks that can be automated 100%, unattended back office RPA, for example, and less attention paid to tasks that can be automated alongside a human workflow. So take, for example, a service agent desktop where the agent's working with a lot of legacy desktop applications, but still has a lot of human touches in the process. If you can automate that 20 to 50% of a service agent process that is manual and based on legacy applications, that agent can provide much better service to the customer or constituent, and that cumulatively can provide a much better ROI than just looking at back office, completely autonomous robotics use cases.
All right. So in terms of, obviously we'll go into both of these different technologies, but in terms of getting started for organizations that are looking to basically dip their toe in or get their start in RPA, what approach would you recommend that they take to kind of ramp up and on-ramp on RPA?
To on-ramp on RPA, well, I think to get started with RPA, there needs to be two buckets of process analysis done. There needs to be machine-based process and intelligence analysis using desktop analytics and process intelligence tools that really understand how a process is getting completed and identifying gaps that can be automated with RPA, or can have AI applications implemented to increase efficiency. But don't forget the human touch. Talk to your people, understand how work really gets done. Processes are typically documented, but sometimes they're not, and sometimes there are parts of the processes that aren't documented the way you would like, or the way they actually happen in reality.
All right. So that's RPA. I think we've kind of established the separation of state, if you will, for these technologies. What about getting started with AI?
I think understanding what AI can do for your organization. I talk to organizations that are really excited about AI because they've heard a lot of hype, but they don't really understand what their core use cases are, or what the ROI, investment versus return is for AI. So really understanding where those core use cases are, looking at higher volume areas like natural language processing applications that can help automate document-based workflows, and just having realistic expectations for what AI can do.
All right. So we kind of talked about them separately, but there's the idea or the term out there of intelligent automation, if you will, which is sort of commingling the two technologies in order to deliver something. How is intelligent automation playing out in government organizations from your perspective?
So from my perspective, I see RPA and AI as great starting points to broader intelligent automation strategies. At Pega, we see IA as even bigger than AI and RPA. IA, intelligent automation, also includes low-code application development for the rapid deployment and delivery of quick-turn business apps. We see it including process analytics, process mining, desktop analytics, and similar applications. And it's really taking the momentum that you generate from those early successful AI implementations, from those early successful RPA implementations, and really rethinking processes from start to finish and leveraging the best tools of a complete toolkit to get ongoing outcomes and to be able to iterate continuously and not have automation become a silo and not have automations break when other parts of your business and IT infrastructure change.
Okay, great. So we've only got about a minute left here, but before we wrap up, any final words or final advice for succeeding in these areas?
I'll just recap a couple of things I said earlier. Really consider what the impact of attended RPA, which sometimes is called robotic desktop automation or desktop automation. In an RPA strategy, that those use cases should be considered because we typically see a lot more scale with those, although it's the back office use cases that really unsexy rote work that tends to be focused on first. And the second is just really understanding processes, having IT work together with the business. A lot of the hype we hear about RPA is that you don't need IT to get RPA started. That can be completely led by the business. It's really a collaborative effort to succeed. You need IT oversight, auditing, and control to make sure that changes in business logic don't break robotic automations, to make sure robotic automation doesn't run afoul of your security policies and other compliance protocols you have to implement. And really, a collaborative effort does lead to the best results.
All right, excellent. Nolan, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your coming and sponsorship from Pega. Yep, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much to both of you. All right. So we are going to move on to our next panel. But before we do, we have our winners for our trivia to announce. So let me get to the answer to make sure everyone knows exactly what it is. But we did have one winner. So the answer was 77,000. So let's start with the question if anyone forgot it. How much money did IBM supercomputer Watson win on Jeopardy? Does anyone want to yell at some of their answers? Any? All right. The answer was 77,000. Oh, shoot. Here we go. 77,147 when Watson beat Brad Rutter and famously Ken Jennings. So the question is, what table won? The winning answer was from table 1 with 75,000. All right. So we Aaron will be coming around with the tickets. All right. So our next panel is going to be entitled "Governing AI and RPA Growth." Our goal with this panel is to talk about some of the issues that come up with growing AI, such as the ethics, some of the bias, and then issues such as workforce and security. So the panel, if I could introduce the panelists, it's going to be moderated by Colonel Jason Windsor, who is GovernmentCIO's Chief Health Information Officer. Coming on over a little bit more time. And he will be joined by the Department of Labor's Chief Information Officer, Gundeep Ahluwalia, the Director of Enterprise Measurement and Design at the Veterans Experience Office, Anil Tilbay, as well as Dr. Alvin Liu, an assistant professor over at Johns Hopkins University. So I will let you take it from here, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, outstanding, great crowd, great crowd. So to be honest, I was a little nervous when I saw the panelists that they asked me to sit with, and then thankfully Gundeep said he was nervous as well. So,
we're all nervous.
But as a newly into the workforce, I've been civilian workforce for about 3 months now. So obviously I have that labor connection. I'm also 3 months retired Army officer, so I'm in that veteran side, but as a clinician, acute care nurse, I'm also interested in that research side. So it made sense to fit this panel. So to start off, it's really basically, why artificial intelligence or robotic process automation? Where do AI and RPA fit? And what are the potential benefits and outcomes that you see within your industry organizations? Gundeep, let's start with you.
So I'm really excited about artificial intelligence. I have had challenges with finding biological intelligence, so I thought artificial intelligence is great. I think there is tremendous possibilities in every mission area, every program area that we have. I always like to start a little bit with what does labor do, because otherwise most people think, oh, that they are the people who actually give us the labor statistics every other Friday. Well, we also protect all of your 401ks. We run Job Corps Center. We run apprenticeship programs. We administer with the states the unemployment insurance programs across the nation. We enforce safety and health, both in mines as well as in workplaces. We administer the transition assistance program in partnership with VA and DoD. VETS is a part of the Department of Labor. Every temp visa, every temp worker coming into the United States, whether agricultural or other occupations, has to first stop is Department of Labor, right? So with that diversity of mission areas, right? When I got to the department, I said like, oh, I have to devise an IT program that caters to all of these different things. Boy, that is a tough thing to do. But I think the biggest promise for artificial intelligence, RPA, and some of these newer technologies is to allow our citizens to get better service from the government, right? And two, to move our folks from low value to high value work, right? I get this so many different times when I go across my building where people have 3 or 4 screens open and they're trying to make sense out of some amount of data, throw it into an Excel spreadsheet. And then I ask them, what are you? Well, I'm an economist. Not a spreadsheet expert, right? But we've turned these people because IT is so hard, and not, instead of enabling them, it's actually hurting them. So I'm very excited that AI, RPA, some of these newer technologies can actually help us move those folks from low value to high value work. And while doing so, that breadth of mission areas that I talked about, I would like to think that we can protect your 401ks better. I would like to think that we can get these temp workers in conjunction with a DHS in a timely fashion and make sure they are temp and they go back, right? We are here to put out those job statistic numbers. So in all of these areas, there is opportunity. They're very opportunity rich, in my opinion. And we have been as great as we have been in fragmenting our data and making mission delivery services hard over the years, I think now is the opportunity to deploy these new technologies and uncomplicate them a little bit again.
Okay. Anil, same thing from
Sure,
the veteran
sure.
experience aspect?
Definitely. So the question is, how do we realize the AI potential? Just like you, it will be important, prudent, to give you a very brief overview of how VA provides services for our veterans and caregivers and survivors, the families of veterans. VA is made up of 3 administrations. We have the Veterans Benefit Administration. You could be receiving GI Bill benefits. You could be receiving loan guarantee benefits. You have the Veterans Health Administration. It's a significant portion of our portfolio where veterans in their entire journey as a combat veteran, any branch, any service, transitioning veteran who has transitioned, they can receive services from the Veterans Health Administration. And ultimately is the National Cemetery Administration as it relates to services that families need and veterans need. Where I reside is the Veterans Experience Office. You all may remember several years ago the Phoenix crisis, where there were veterans waiting in line, and combination of terminally ill, very late stage cancer, things that needed to be addressed, healthcare concerns that they had. And you may remember that there was truly lapse in service. And as a result of that, and to ensure that that never happens again at the VA, the Veterans Experience Office was created. We've been able to create, using human-centered design, the entire experience of the veteran. From the minute you're even considering, I want to admit myself to the services, I want to join the Army, what does that look like? What is that exact experience for the veteran? To getting in the military, getting out of the military, and also what do I do once I transition? What services do I have, do I need? Those are the specific transactional experiences, moments that veterans said that matter to them, but also the pain points they identified that VA needs to address. The Veterans Experience Office has been able to itemize, demonstrate, and reveal. The potential of AI is huge. In 2015, VA created the first data science program office as it relates to detecting and predicting where discrimination at the VA will take place. We use true AI, not just a subset, thinking through basic machine learning, nothing rudimentary and archaic, a truly comprehensive end-to-end AI capability where in the country, by age, by race, by various genders, age groups, so on and so forth. How can we make that determination? How can we make that prediction so we know discrimination may, could, or will take place? And it was a truly transformational implementation. It's still being led by our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Harvey Johnson, and that phenomenal work that will be deployed in AI continues today. I also think of VA made up of 2 components, and I think this could apply to any agency, any administration. I think of, as it relates to analytics, the environment made up of 2 domains. There's an operational domain and there's an enforcement domain. Operational domain are the services that you provide, services that the VA provides, transactional, GI Bill benefits, healthcare benefits, cemetery benefits. But when it comes to enforcement, it's important for us as we think about realizing the potential of AI at the VA to think about how do we detect waste, fraud, and abuse? How do we detect and predict discrimination? How do we detect and predict whistleblowing activities that will take place? My responsibility at the VA at the enterprise level is to design program offices and design programmatic, tactical, and strategic capabilities for the VA as it relates to operational needs, as it relates to enforcement needs. And I'm very happy and excited to tell you all more. What does that look like? How have we done that in the past, and what our plans are in doing that more in the future?
Dr. Liu, a little different experience from the university academic side, so potential outcomes?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm a clinician. I'm an ophthalmologist with additional training in retina, so I take care of patients with medical, surgical retina problems. Being a doctor involves different skill sets, and one of the most important skill sets is pattern recognition. being able to recognize disease pattern. And that's why we have to go through years of medical school training, residency, and fellowship. The recent rise in AI, specifically in the form of deep learning, it's very good at pattern recognition. So I think the rise of deep learning, it's a natural marriage to medicine. And we're all very excited about it. On a more macro level, I think at the very least, deep learning-based computer algorithms will be developed into very useful and powerful clinical tools to allow us to, at a minimum, screen patients for diseases and make accurate diagnosis. This will in turn hopefully make us better doctors, be able to take better care of our patients and improve patient care. And as someone like me who straddles the world of clinical medicine and AI research, this is indeed very exciting times because the future is here. It's no longer just science fiction. The first FDA-approved fully automatic AI system is in my field, retina, and it's being used for screening of diabetic retinopathy. It is being deployed in real life right now, and one of you may use it pretty soon. So this is just the beginning of a very profound change in the medical field.
And I was going to ask a question next about work cases within your industry. So Anil, we'll start with you. Are there any specific cases that are going on within the VA in AI in your area?
Sure. I'd love to expand a little bit on enforcement as it relates to discrimination, and then we'll talk about operational metrics and why do we do that. So going back to what I said earlier, any administration, any agency, whether you're working in counterintelligence, whether you're working in a purely transactional customer-to-customer basis, we've made a determination that it is best, and it's a path of least resistance, to think about problem solving, thinking in the AI domain in operational and enforcement. Now, the specific use cases, putting technology behind and requirements first is by far the most important thing you can do, and that's what we have done. We have learned that it's absolutely critical you prioritize and take the time to define your use cases. So to answer the specific things that you're doing, it's important for us to identify how we even come up with those things. What do we even know what to work on? McKinsey said very well recently about a shiny object syndrome with AI being what it is, and everyone is excited about it. Then you find out about a technology capability, and it looks great. You get the demo about the technology capability, and it's phenomenal. Then you procure it. Then you start to think about what problem you're trying to solve. It's actually backwards. But what we have done in the Veterans Experience Office for the VA is created VA's human-centered design practice, what's called the Enterprise Design Office for the VA. You have to come up with your use cases using human-centered design. It's extremely critical for all AI leaders, AI ethicists, AI technologists, machine learning experts. Anyone who touches AI, it should learn how to develop, how to problem solve, get certified in human-centered design. Because then you've solved a huge problem, could potentially save tens, hundreds of billions of dollars, which is, I know how to problem solve. And it's a matter of solving the problem method-based, comprehensively, chronologically, using experience design, human-centered design in the most veteran-centered way. We knew from our customers, not just our veterans, that it was important for us to detect and predict where discrimination is taking place and could take place. Getting into a little bit of the mechanics and the theory, nearest neighbors is by far one of the most promising capabilities in AI that we need to continue to think through and come up with evolutions around. Think of nearest neighbors, your typical google.com. You go to Google, you run a search. What you're able to do in our AI ecosystem is you're able to, no kidding, run a search on, you can say, male veteran between the ages of 40 to 49, envision one, what are the likelihood of discrimination taking place, and you're able to see that. Because you're running a human-based and natural, authentic user experience search, the result you expect it to be nonlinear and intelligent. That's essentially the gist of google.com. But to be able to clone that and replicate that across various use cases is a huge challenge. So as we think about deploying more nearest neighbors capabilities, we have to continue to calibrate and think through the accuracy versus the recall, the precision versus the recall of the AI engines that we're building. What you develop, and the second example that I'll give, and I'll talk more in healthcare, as it relates to what's important for women and what may become important for women. Now, as we're thinking operationally and stepping off from enforcement, when a female veteran describes their experience, the experience that they had in radiology services, it may be entirely different than how a male veteran describes their services that they received from the same or similar radiology clinics. Concerns and needs women have as it relates to radiology, very different than the concerns men could have if we were to think through chest x-rays, for example, or complications that come up with that. I say this because when we think AI capabilities and when we build AI capabilities, we have to fine-tune the engine so that it conforms and evolves in the language that you're building to. Same way you have dialects, you have to build the engine so that it is able to learn using a semi-supervised process at a minimum. Ultimately, forget supervision at all. You want it to be able to churn out and produce products and predictive opportunities for you to make decisions on. If it's in healthcare and if it's for women, it should think differently, the product, as we're continuing to hone it and fine-tune it, versus how it thinks about what the problem is for male veterans.
Gundeep, any other specific use cases within DOL?
Yeah, so we have several use cases that we've deployed. One of the, and it's all about delivering services and moving people to do higher value work. So one of the things that happens is we collect a lot of injury data, Bureau of Labor Statistics, for health and safety violations that happen in the workplace. And these things are all text-based that come on a weekly basis, and then somebody has to read through them and code them. Otherwise, you cannot count, because BLS is in the counting business, right? So how do you make sense out of them? And we would spend hundreds and thousands of hours every week to determine that. So we've successfully deployed a AI-based auto coding kind of a service, which has almost 80% accuracy at this point in time. So that is an enormous amount of savings, both in terms of, and then the time that frees up, it can be now spent on the 20% that that needs actual human attention. So that's one area that we've been using it. It's I couldn't have been paired up better with VA on this panel, I think, because the other place we've used is most returning vets have these military occupational specialty codes. These are these MOS codes, which basically tell you what a vet used to do when you were in service. So you could be a helicopter mechanic, for instance, or you could be in tank repair or something like that, right? And we sit on a large amount of data as to what jobs are available, where are they, right? So I think recently we actually have done certain pilots to map these MOS codes with potential job opportunities or apprenticeship opportunities that may exist out there. So, you're a helicopter mechanic. Hey, there is an engineering apprenticeship in your area. That could be served up, hopefully, at some point in time when this becomes full-blown to a vet before even they board a plane, right? So can you imagine having an app on your phone which just tells you that you're going back to Boise, Idaho, which is what your hometown is, and and you've been a helicopter mechanic for the last 5 years, and here are the potential opportunities that are currently existing and are real in your particular zip code. Now, there are the same thing is they might not want to be in mechanical engineering anymore. So there is that aspect of it as well. So we could provide these tools, and we've deployed and done a pilot recently. I think we'll be running a challenge very soon to take that and move it into a to progress that into a more full-blown solution. Because all of these things, it's like you said, it's not a solution looking for a problem. You have to really start from a problem and then make sure that you continue to stay focused on solving that problem, because that's the other thing. Midway in the project, nobody sometimes knows what the success criteria was when we began with that. So we want to stay focused, grow that capability. The third area, there's been a lot of focus on apprenticeships. We actually rolled out apprenticeship.gov. That was about a year and a half ago. And that capability was envisioned to be a one-stop shop for not only apprenticeship seekers, but employers, educational institutions. And so there we have used a lot of AI and machine learning, because apprenticeships are sort of different. It is very hard to sort of sometimes look at a LinkedIn posting or a normal job posting to distinguish between an apprenticeship and a job. My daughter's a high schooler, so I get all of these apprenticeship opportunities over there. So I tend to go back and look at it through apprenticeship.gov. Is it still showing up or not? And there are times when it doesn't, and that's where the learning comes in. And so those are three areas that we've been using it. We have tons of use cases, like I said, that are almost there is a demand that we can't even we don't have the bandwidth and the understanding. And to be honest with you, the other thing is the partnership, and I was talking to Dr. Lube before we came on stage, was we really have to, because this is nascent, right? It's still evolving. I think we have to not only talk to mission areas, but the academia, the research folks to help us evolve this technology, both from an efficacy standpoint, but also ethics and governance, and how does this become something which we have a good handle on and we can deploy in a meaningful manner in a very short amount of time, right? So I think that collaboration needs to continue to happen. We have a lot of need for it.
Alvin, you mentioned the diabetic retinopathy use case. Are there any other use cases going on right now?
I think that's a very good example. I do want to briefly address what Anil talked about, the human-centered solutions. I think that's a very important concept, especially in medicine, because ultimately, as doctors, our goal is to take care of patients, and a human-centered solution is very important. And I think the university environment is particularly conducive to encouraging collaboration between people with very different backgrounds. For example, at Johns Hopkins, there's a Malone Center for Engineering and Healthcare that was specifically set up to foster collaboration between engineers and doctors. I'm involved in various artificial intelligence projects, and usually the way we do it is, from my clinical observation on a day-to-day basis, I identify a clinical problem. I identify a problem, I identify a preferred outcome, then I go to my engineer and say, hey, this is my clinical problem. I want to go from A to B. Is this problem amendable to a deep learning or machine learning solution? And if yes, what kind of data you need? How do we move forward? So that's number one. When it comes to cases of artificial intelligence application in medicine, I think the poster child is diabetic retinopathy. And let me just give a little bit of background information. It's been projected that within a couple of decades, about a third of the American population will have diabetes. And about 10% of these patients would have severe enough complications of diabetes, mostly in the retina, that they will need to see an eye doctor on a regular basis. And we have a couple of problems here. One, there are a lot of patients to screen. And two, people are just not very compliant with the screening to begin with. Right now, we know nationwide, in the best case scenario, about 50% of people who are supposed to get eye exam actually get one. And that number is the same within Hopkins internally. So the case used in diabetic retinopathy screening is that there's this IDX system that's been developed at the University of Iowa. It's been FDA approved. What it does is that it can be deployed in the primary care setting, operated by not an ophthalmologist, by someone with minimal training. The idea is that if you have diabetes, you go see your internal medicine doctor, you sit down, get a picture taken of the back of the eye, And automatically, without any human input, that machine will tell you whether you need to go see an eye doctor for further workup or not. This system is FDA approved, and currently we are trying to deploy that within the Johns Hopkins health system so that we can increase the internal screen rates and also set up systems where once they screen positive, they can come directly to the Wilmer Eye Institute and be seen and managed accordingly. So I think that's a good case use, and it's here, it's happening.
I think we have time for one last question, and since each
eye appointment,
absolutely,
right after
absolutely, Gandhi.
At least increase the screening rates.
Absolutely. Since each of you have had the words governing and bias and ethics, which is great for this panel, I wanted to bring up and close with that topic. It was recently reported that the Pentagon and the DoD is interested in acquiring an AI ethicist, and knowing that there are other agencies and organizations that are putting their interest and their dollars into those areas, just kind of wanted to get your feeling on whose responsibility it is to use AI ethically. Any thoughts on that?
So I think it is so very often when these sort of technologies come in, I think the mission areas and program areas sort of feel that it's an IT problem. You got this technology, now you figure it out how to make it ethical, right? Or make it. I think it's a responsibility that is shared across the organization. It is also shared across the research organizations, the academia that is actually generating all of these new technologies at a very fast pace. And I worry about. I'm less worried about artificial intelligence actually taking over and the new Terminator movie's out, so I'm less worried about that. But I think I'm a little more worried about when I hear about things like we used AI to screen resumes, right? And realized after 6 months that, oh, by the way, the conscious or unconscious bias that our society has was actually made more prominent at the end of 6 months when we used certain AI, right? So how does research help us, right? How do we deploy it in a manner that, one, we have some guardrails against it, against these sort of biases, and when they happen, a mechanism to sort of identify quickly and fix it. I mean, that's what we do with human beings, right? If my daughter's going off the rails, I want to recognize it quickly and respond to it. So it's a whole life cycle of ethics that has to be introduced to this whole space. One, how do we introduce this technology and make sure that we do not inadvertently introduce the biases that we have as human beings into it? And then two, when these biases actually start coming up, how do we identify them quickly? How do we fix them? And that's where I think research and will play a large role as well. We are nowhere close to getting an ethicist at the department, I would say, but it is a top-of-mind awareness for me, and I've been thinking really hard, and even things like RPA, right? How will they proliferate the IT landscape? And we've seen in traditional technology play that we fragmented our databases. We did this in the past, right? Now is an opportunity for not letting that happen with AI, RPA, all over again, right? So I actually encourage everybody in this room and everybody at the department to sort of think about and the pace is much higher, right? With the evolution of this technology and its adoption. So we all have a shared responsibility, I think, and we all should think about what we are adopting, what pace we are adopting, and what guardrails we'll build around that.
Anil, any closing thoughts on that?
Sure. For me, I think of ethics and how to control that around 2 dimensions. I'll give an example on waste, fraud, and abuse, and then I'll talk about everything that I've learned from the Army about human intelligence and signals intelligence and why that still works perfectly. AI will be used to govern and surveil activities as they relate to waste, fraud, and abuse, it will be used. It will be used more prominently. It will be used to hold employees accountable. It's agnostic of the federal government, but it's the ethics piece in how we build the environment to ensure it's accurately or precisely. Accuracy versus precision is always the gambit that we're dancing around all day, every single minute, trying to fine-tune the Python code and asking why are we doing it the way we are. There will be determinations made and how the engine is built around the intelligence gathered from our veterans, from our VA employees. That's why I mentioned earlier, and it continues to translate, and it will continue to transform the AI environment. HCD has to coexist with AI. AI should not be deployed without true end-to-end integration of human-centered design. Using human-centered design, you're prioritizing the human intelligence. You're prioritizing what the information is on the ground, what your customers are saying, and what your employees are saying. Your employees want one thing, your customers want another thing. You triangulate agnostically, pragmatically, then you triangulate theoretically, mathematically, and ultimately you make that cocktail determination of the precision and the accuracy, and you build the environment. Then you start generating signals. The signals are the detection and the prediction telling you what will happen, what is happening, what could happen. But then the signals have to be washed again against the human intelligence, against the customers. What are they saying? Do they actually agree? Can they validate and verify what is happening? It's this constant iterate, like it's just constant, you loop and you loop and you loop and you loop. Human intelligence, the veterans, in our case, our employees, providing us with information. We build AI engines around it, then it creates signals. We then validate those signals with our employees and our veterans and caregivers, families and survivors. They help fact check, they help fine tune, and we refine the engine, and we continue to get more signals, and we continue to make predictions. It's that involvement that you have to deploy your team around as it relates to the accuracy and the precision. And lastly, it's important to recognize that AI will be used significantly more prominently in the enforcement space. Obviously, it's been going on for a long time, but there are ways in which it will be ramped up in non-intelligence ecosystems, non-surveillance ecosystems, because it has extraordinary aptitude to detect and predict what activities are taking place and should they be taking place. And those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Alvin, anything quickly?
Sure. So I think the short answer is everyone should be involved in making sure that AI technology is ethical and fair. There's a saying in research, which is garbage in, garbage out, and AI algorithm is only as good as the training data. And just to give you a quick example, the most common reason why people lose central vision in the US in people over the age of 50 is age-related macular degeneration. It's a condition that predominantly affects Caucasian patients. So if you have an algorithm that's trained with mostly data generated from Caucasian patients, when you apply it on a patient, let's say Asian American or African American, that algorithm may or may not work. However, this kind of bias can only be detected or predicted if you involve doctors in the first place. Doctors who understand the data in the first place, doctors who understand the biologic variation in the first place. So the first step is recognizing AI is not omnipotent. There will be biases. Recognize the problem first. Number two is to work very closely with people who actually understand the training data in coming up with ways to minimize the potential bias.
Well, gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much. It has indeed been an honor and a privilege. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So we are now going to our networking break. Before I let you guys go, we have a great second half lined up to include the Chief Financial Officer for GSA, who's leading one of the community of practices, as well as the Chief Technology Officer for Health and Human Services, Ed Simcox. So please come back. The first thing we're going to do when we get back is have our second trivia question. So we'll see if another table can pick up a victory. All right? So food is just here to the left. Bathrooms when you got off the elevator right to the right. So we're going to do just a quick All right, you ready? Okay, we're going to kick off. We'll let people come on over, but the people who are sitting at their tables are going to have an advantage here with the trivia session. So, before we bring Chief Technology Officer, people in the networking area, could you guys, could we move over here or just take conversations outside? It's not going to happen. All right. Okay, we'll give people a second. All right. Was anybody actually close on the last trivia question? 75,000 was the closest answer. 77,000 was the answer. I promise the next one's not around Jeopardy, but we're gonna try to have some fun with this. So let me bring it up actually. All right. So we've talked a lot about data here. Using data, I mean, it's the lifeblood for quite a few of these AI and RPA initiatives and programs. So that's what the next question that we wanted to have around. So the question is, how many bytes of data are generated each day? Worldwide. How many bytes of data are generated each day? Worldwide. All right. Could you do something? What are you doing? Do something. Talk to people. All right, we have like 2 minutes. Can you just go around and like get people to like be quiet or like move? It's very distracting, especially our people. All right. Okay, do we have our answers? Chris, you picking them up? Who do we have over here? Do we have Aaron? Is Aaron here? Squires? Aaron Squires? Paging Aaron Squires. All right, Melissa, come on over. You're going to be you're going to stand in for Aaron. Come on. All right, can you pick up the on that side of the table? Or no, not up. Can you just pick up the answers to the tables? Yep. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Let's do that real quick. So we will, at the end of this panel discussion and the start of the next one, we will announce the winner. Okay. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first interview for the second half of the session. It's going to be with Chief Technology Officer of Health and Human Services, Ed Simcox. We're going to have moderating the interview. We're going to have GovernmentCIO Media Research staff writer Faith Ryan, as well as Senior Vice President of GovernmentCIO, Aaron Mirsky. So if I could introduce all three of you to the stage and we'll kick off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Michael. So, as many of you know, the Department of Health and Human Services is the largest federal civilian agency. It operates 11 operating divisions, and it has, a bunch of offices, institutes, and centers associated with the overall HHS agency. As the largest grant-making agency for research in the U.S., it funds and leverages emerging technologies such as machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data analytics tools. So tasked with promoting this approach to tech-driven health solutions is the HHS Office of the Chief Technology Officer. And with us today is HHS CTO Ed Simcox. Ed, we're so happy to have you here.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
So just kicking things off, artificial intelligence is such a big, important, interesting topic, and you've been on the cusp of innovation in healthcare technology for nearly 20 years. So as the HHS CTO, we just would like to know, what are you and your team up to?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So we, HHS is a very, very large organization. We have many agencies under us. We are the largest civilian agency, as you'd mentioned, and because of that, we generate a lot of data. It's research data, administrative data, scientific data, around basic sciences, especially at NIH. But all of our agencies, including our small agencies, generate a lot of data. We have tens of thousands of data sets across HHS. And because of that, there's also a lot of opportunity around machine learning and AI. We did a data call recently to try and uncover production level machine learning and AI and RPA projects that are going on. And we were able to surface, as far as production projects are concerned, we were able to surface 18 of those that are in production today across 12 different agencies and staff divisions within HHS. So we're off to a good start in using data, especially for greater secondary use beyond the primary use of why the data was created in the first place, using advanced technologies.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So with this huge data challenge that you're trying to solve, that's both scientific data, business data, how did you and your team decide on the approach and methodology to tackle this?
I'd like to take credit for the open data movement at HHS, but really the credit goes to the first CTO at HHS who took that role around 10 years ago under the last administration, Todd Park, who was a huge believer and proponent in the open data movement, especially within government. And he believed very strongly, as did a lot of people, that the data that is generated within federal organizations belongs to the taxpayer, belongs to the researcher, belongs to not only the folks who are generating the data within government, but across government. We need to figure out how to surface that data, open that data, and democratize that data. And that was a very, very important thing. That was a very important conversation for us to start to have back then. As we have moved and matured, we've gone past this idea of just opening up the data. We have to figure out now how to put it to better use, how to scale our use of that data. We are data rich at HHS. We're information and insight poor in a big way. There are great pockets of secondary use of data within HHS, but we have a long way to go on that. When I came into the role, we did a listening tour, and we went out to all of the major agencies and offices, and we asked them a series of very open-ended questions, kind of in the spirit of human-centered design. And two recurring themes in almost every conversation that we had were, number one, we're starving for data. We're starving for data from other components of HHS, other components of the federal government, as well as outside, to get better insights and drive policy decisions, drive research, drive science. The other thing that we realized, though, was that there was a great reluctance. We heard almost across the board that people were fearful of sharing data, sharing their data, for really good reasons. Number one, a lot of our data is heavily regulated. So you're probably familiar with HIPAA, which carries restrictions around privacy of patient data. There are a multitude of other lesser known restrictions and regulatory issues associated with a lot of our data sets. And sometimes you layer on 3 or 4 of those, and it makes it supremely difficult to try and surface that data and put it to better use. The other thing that we heard loud and clear was that people felt a sense of stewardship over the data. And a lot of times we give that a short shrift and say, oh, well, they're just trying to block the use of the data. But that's not necessarily the case. The people that have been in this data for years and years and years are fearful that the data can be misused and it can cause harm. It can cause harm to people, and it can lead to bad policy decisions. So when we very first started going down this road, we said, how can we surface this data in a meaningful way? How can we scale the sharing of data? And what we very quickly realized is that we had to go to the people first and care for the fears, the wants, and the desires, So the appetite for data that I mentioned, as well as the concerns around sharing that data. And that's what our Data Insights Initiative is all about.
I think that connection that people have to the work and the value of the work at HHS really resonates, and it's great to go out and talk to them to build that trust so that the data platform can be available. So as you know, there's numerous platforms across HHS. We've heard a number of them this morning and in other federal agencies. How is this initiative going to be unique?
Like I had mentioned, pardon me, I'm losing my voice here a little bit. We wanted to listen, and one of the other things that we do in my office is human-centered design. So we're kind of the open innovation shop at HHS, and we wanted to eat our own dog food on this. And so we put into practice human-centered design, and we went out and we talked with scientists, researchers, actuaries, and administrative folks from different walks of life, different professions, to find out what they needed from a data science platform and a research platform. We spent many months really gathering requirements at the people level, if you will, the program level within HHS to figure out how we could create a platform that would serve as much of the need from an enterprise level as possible. So that was a really, really helpful thing. We didn't want to jump right to a solution. The other thing that I did is I kind of went on a listening tour across federal government. I talked to some of the leaders in this room about data projects that they have going on, and spent some time with some folks who have been down this road before and have learned key lessons, if you will, about how to get folks to share data. And one of the things that we learned early, we actually did start to put out a broad communication about, hey, we need to start surfacing data. We need to bring that data to the forefront. And what the way that was perceived and interpreted, because we hadn't done that human-centered design first, was we're coming for your data, so you're going to give it to us. And that doesn't work. That's not a sustainable thing. You may be able to do that once or twice, but to keep the data fresh, to do refresh of data, or to get real-time access to data, or to be on a perpetual cycle of data, it's really important for you to care for those other things. So we also wanted to build into the platform a way to engender trust with data stewards so that they felt like at all times they had visibility into that data and the way that it was being used and the algorithms that were being run against that data.
So based on that human-centered focus and the data stewardship, what are the areas that you are most looking forward to in terms of how this program will change the analytics and the AI work at HHS?
So we know that, kind of going back to the platform a little bit, what we've done is we've decided to create a platform, again, that allows for a broad use of applications. So you can think about just simple tools like R and Python. I say simple in comparison to some of the more sophisticated things that we do in machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence. We wanted a place where we could surface this data, catalog the data, secure the data, and create, for those of you in the room who are non-technical, a card catalog type of a situation, where if you're trying to solve a policy issue or you're trying to advance your science, you can go into a card catalog like you would in a library, where you may not know all the titles of books that are in that library, but you know the kind of the topical things that you want to go after, and you can use a card catalog to then drill down on the data, i.e. the books that are available. So that's one of the things that we're creating. The other thing we're doing is creating a very collaborative environment where the data steward can actually be in the computing environment at any given time, so real time, or also have a dashboard with a history of how their data is being accessed, how many times, and can actually view the algorithms that are being run against their particular data set.
That's a great component. I know people want to give back with the work that they're doing, and to be able to see how their data is being used is a great component of it.
So, can you explain how exactly this new initiative impacts AI initiatives?
Yeah, sure. So Number one, we have to have, a lot of times what happens is we go into projects, AI projects. I'd mentioned we have 18 going on right now. I was able to find 4 of those who were accessing the same data sets for the most part. And every time that we have to manually go request data, we have to do what we call a manual data use agreement, a DUA. Other components of the federal government probably call it something else, but anytime we're talking about regulated data, there's this idea of a data use agreement there. What we found was that it was very hard to scale AI and machine learning type things because the really smart people that we want doing that type of work, we're spending so much time on legal things, administrative things, and process things. So this platform also cares for this idea of a data use agreement in an automated way. So I'll give you an interesting stat. One of our very largest agencies has a huge amount of data, and one of our smallest agencies relies heavily on that data. The smaller agency has 300 people in it, and there are 200 data use agreements, 200 active data use agreements just to get access to the data from the big agency. 300 employees, 200 data use agreements. Every single one of these data use agreements takes months of back and forth in email. And involves lawyers, it involves policy people, privacy people, et cetera, to get done. So one of the things that we're building into the platform is a way to automate that process, a document routing and creation type of a mechanism where we can template these things and we can adjudicate these things one time. And then we can care for the deltas associated with the next time we use the data. So our hope is, 80% of that data use agreement can be reused the next time that data set is needed, and we can just care for the rest of it. So if we want to go deeper, say in machine learning or AI, it may be important for us to say care for de-identification or re-identification of that data. But at least we've got the tranche of the 80% already cared for in the context of the data use agreement. We can just work on that 20%. So we're able to accelerate the time to value of getting this data up in the platform so that people can use it.
So one of the areas that you had shared with me earlier when we were talking is the use of virtual notebooks to enable AI. Can you share more with everyone about how you're thinking about notebooks?
Yes. So we decided to take, if at all possible and at all costs, we wanted to examine the environment of open source with this project. I'm a firm believer that we need to at least rule out open source when we look at this. So the entire stack that we have built is predicated on open source. That's the first thing. The second thing we wanted to do was, I love all of our cloud vendors, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't have vendor lock associated with the way we were doing this business. We wanted the stack, if you will, to be portable enough to where we could land that stack in a multitude of different platforms, understanding that when you cross over into a new platform, you're going to have to do some refactoring and reconfiguration. So those were some guiding principles that we had right away, so the open source part of it. Then we built up the stack. We wanted to make sure that we could care for all of the different analytical uses that might be necessary where people bring tools. CMS probably has the most data and the most valuable data, if you will, to the external research community here in the United States. And they primarily compute with SAS and secondarily with Stata. So we needed to care for those tools. We also wanted to care for R and Python and various open source tools. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that we cared for more advanced analytical approaches, where we're starting to talk about machine learning and AI types of things. So those were the requirements. And what we came up with was this idea of the notebook metaphor. And the notebook metaphor allows us to, you can either bring your own tools, and we care for licensing associated with bringing your own tools, but we also have a palette of 9 tools available. And just want to make it very clear that we actually just started the development of this platform 7 weeks ago. And within 5 weeks, we had a minimally viable product, and we had 136 data sets, public use data sets, up in the platform. And the reason we were able to go so fast is we were able to build on the good work of actually some of the folks in this room, where they had already gone through FedRAMP processes, they had already been ATO'd internally, and they've been able to share their documentation with us, so we don't have to start from scratch. But the one thing that I wanted to go back to is the reason this is important for AI is really, I think, twofold. Number one, again, going back to the stewardship of the data, we want people to feel comfortable that they have visibility into how their data is being used. That's supremely important. It's very difficult to get folks to share data in the first place. But if they feel like they're part of the team that is doing the work, and they feel like it's a collaborative environment where you have auditing of the entire process, where at any given time, if an algorithm is run against the data, you're able to capture that in a point of time and rerun that, and the data steward can see what's going on. And up in the corner of the screen, they have the ability to look at the data use agreement. They can then make sure their data is being accessed and used within the four corners of that data use agreement. That's really important as we start to talk about learning algorithms and things, to make sure that we have scale and critical mass, and get people comfortable with the idea of sharing their data.
So I think that we're out of time, but I just want to say 7 weeks is amazing. I know that everyone in this room was very quiet listening to every word you said, so I really look forward to seeing some of the results and hearing the next steps of the efforts that you put in, and just listening to the considerations that you've taken from human-centered design, the technology stacks, some of the privacy and patient data. I think it's a very thoughtful approach. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Thanks for letting me share. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, before we get to the next panel, I do want to announce the winner for our second trivia question. I'm a little, somebody might have used the Google machine here on this one, but they hit it, table 8 hit it right on the nose for 2.5 quintillion. So well done to, where's table 8? I'm looking right here. Well done. Well done. All right. We'll have the chairs come up here in a second. All right, our next, we're going to move to our next panel discussion here. We're going to have, the focus here is going to be data models and processing. I'm especially excited about this one, considering the collection that we have here, folks. It's going to be moderated by Amy Kluber, who is our esteemed managing editor over at GovernmentCIO Media Research. She will be joined by the Chief Data Officer for GSA, Chris Rowley, Oki Mek, who is the Senior Advisor to the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Health and Human Services, Kurt Kern, who is the Chief Technology Officer for NetApp, and then finally, David Marin, statistician for the Department of Veterans Affairs and works directly with Gil, who you just saw a little bit earlier. So take it from here, Amy.
Cool. All right. Hello, everyone. So with automation, as we know and we've heard throughout the morning, you need a solid data management strategy. We heard it time and time and again, especially with the congressman earlier. These guys here have been working on some pretty cool initiatives in that regard, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about them. So you should too. So let me start by opening it up to the panel. Any of you can jump right in with this first question. What is the importance for government agencies to develop a solid data management strategy before performing automation functions? Chris, let's start with you.
Sure. All right. Thanks for having me. It's a great event. In terms of a data management strategy, I'll talk very briefly about top-down and bottom-up. So from a top-down perspective, as Chief Data Officer, I have to flow throughout the organization. I have to be able to coalesce leadership around common priorities, common problems, common theories, and at the same time be able to translate those back down to our data scientists, data practitioners who are engaging with the data to build the capabilities, the analysis, prove the theories, and then be able to help translate those up through the chain. And if you don't have an enterprise data management strategy where you're trying to build and connect the various data capabilities across the agency to be accessed by those data practitioners. It's very challenging to build the capabilities to prove those results. Automation plays a role there in doing that, but it's not necessarily an essential thing that you have to have in order to get started. What you really need to get started is the upper level engagement around understanding what the needs, challenges, and priorities are, and an accessible route to get to those data practitioners to help proving how you solve it. As you build momentum and you prove value, then you can start to think more about automation and the technology aspects around it.
Okay, what do you think?
No, that's a great point. First of all, thanks GovernmentCIO for having us here, and thank all of you guys for attending. I think collaboration is key to innovation and adoption as well. So I thank you guys for coming here this morning. I think I'll make it simple. I think the biggest hurdle is getting away from paper. I think you have to make sense of the data before you have a data strategy, and you can't analyze paper. We have too many paper in the federal government. I think just trying to digitize the data, that would be the first step. That would be the biggest hurdle. If you could achieve that, then you could go on to the next stage of analyzing the data, mapping the data, looking at some, things that might be double work or duplicate, something that you are overlapping. There's a lot of overlaps in the government. I think once you figure out the data, then you could free to do RPA or AI. I think for us in HSS, we use machine learning. Once we digitize the data, is to categorize or cluster the data or classify the data, because data comes in different formats, unstructured, structure, emails in some cases, Word, photos in some cases, I don't know. I mean, there's so many unstructured data. You have to make sense of the data, and we use machine learning to cluster the data to make sense of it. And then you are able to free yourself to start doing data mapping. Not only that, but you can condense some of the processes, but also having insights on, performance measures, strategic analysis, because data has a lot of insight. If you can make data smart, you could do a lot of things with data. I think data is the key, but the biggest hurdle is getting away from paper.
And Kirk, your product fits in with all this, so can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I'd like to attack it from a technology perspective. And if you look at any successful AI project, it's highly contingent on having access to massive amounts of data and information. The interesting aspect of that, however, is that information can be housed in multiple forms. It can be structured, unstructured, and even object technology now, right? And so you have these three dissimilar technologies all needing to come together in order to generate a successful return on your investment for an AI project. What we found is that customers are trying to attempt to solve that consolidation problem through the creation of data lakes or potentially data oceans. What we find there is when you combine all that information, the information content in those data lakes now is governed through multiple restrictions and multiple compliance regulations, whether it be PCI data, healthcare data, HIPAA data, maybe even classified information. And so it becomes a challenge from a metadata perspective in terms of access control and how do you manage that data in those lakes. And so what we're starting to see now is an emergence of a technology called a polystore. Polystore lets you store that information in its native format, but then aggregate all that metadata at a point in this, think of it as an abstraction layer that's at the top of it, the polystore layer, which will then give you an ability to come in, access that information with the appropriate granular access controls on that data in its native format, and then still present all that information back up to its AI engine so that you can start to do training and then real-time inferencing.
And David, I know you are more alongside the AI route, so where does the strategy fit in on those lines?
Right, it's foundational, right, to have quality, clean, uniform data that you can leverage that's in large quantity, right? So if you don't have those in place, you're not going to be able to trust the outcomes that you have with the AI. So in many ways, it's one of those pieces that if you have that in place, you can help leverage the exciting potential that AI has.
So help us understand some of the hurdles that go into making sense of data. Oki touched on, the paper-based nuances that come with trying to do that. What are some other ones, Chris?
When and I talked about this a little bit. the volume of data and the accessibility of it is growing, right? And we have a lot of legacy environments that exist out there, and historically it's been difficult to get these environments to communicate with one another. Technology is advancing to make that easier, even without having to modernize an entire application or platform. So the connectivity of data, or the accessibility of it, is becoming easier. The challenging part is when you start having this large volumes of data coming in from all directions, is really trying to narrow it down to the most valuable components of that data and how they align to challenges or problems. I think the part I discourage when people come to me and say, how can I get a bunch of data to do a machine learning pilot? And my response back to them is, tell me the problem you're trying to solve or the theory that you have, and then let's go do some data discovery to see what has it. Don't start with data, start with the problem or the challenge, because otherwise you're going to spin your wheels trying to accumulate large volumes or get access to large volumes of data with maybe no use case.
Oki, you were kind of involved in that as well, as far as making a business case. So can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It starts with the business, not start with the technology. I always say, there's no such thing as IT project, as business project with IT components. It's always started with the business. It doesn't, whatever it leads to AI or RPA or blockchain, doesn't really matter. I mean, it's how are you solving the business issues. Adoption or innovation is not the emerging tech, it's the processes. I think that people think that it's AI is plug and play, but people don't realize that if you want to do AI work, 80% of it will be normalizing the data, fixing the data, cleaning the data before you could, start doing AI. You have to start, you crawl, walk, run steps. You have to start from looking at the data. Most of the work is cleaning the data. But I think the biggest hurdle, is culture within the federal government. The technology is not the challenge, is the culture. I think in order to fix an issue, or fix a problem, you have to admit that you have a problem before you can fix it. So I think we have to come to our senses and say, hey, we have issues with pushing paper around. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of insight that you could gain from data, but you can't do it with just pushing paper around. You have to digitize the data. That's the first thing you need to do before you start normalizing, analyzing, using predictive analysis. It's just, we need to get away from paper and we need to embrace change. You have to evolve, otherwise you become obsolete. I think that's the key.
I guess it's me. Going in serial. So I'll try and summarize what the two prior speakers had really tried to crystallize in a simple statement. Accessing bad data will render every AI tool useless, right? And you have to spend that time and effort in creating normalized data sets so that you have good quantization levels, and if it's scientific data, for instance, make sure your ranges go from 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 1,000,000. Changing that one step from 1 to 1,000 to 1 to 1,000,000 may increase the time to actually train a machine learning network to the point where you don't reach convergence, and so you spend a lot of wasted time by going through this quantization, ultimately to find out that you can't converge on your network, right? And so there's a lot of iterative process that's involved as you work through these technologies. That's where I think there's some interesting technologies that actually help at the storage layer, at the data layer, right? So something as simple as copy data management can be extremely useful for an analyst or an AI practitioner. Think of the concept of when we go through that normalization, we go from 1 to 1,000 to 1 to 1,000,000. The idea is when I run that 1 to 1,000,000 data set and it didn't converge as expected, I want to be able to revert back to that data set in seconds, right? And conceptually, if it's a petabyte data set, you don't want to create 2 petabytes of information just to find out that requantization did not work. That's where interesting storage technologies come into play, give you the ability to revert back to that previously good data set and go off and run. And then as you start to move into real-time inferencing, the idea of cloning that information with storage efficiency or space efficiency also comes into play. And so we can conceptually take that core data set, clone that multiple times as writable copies, hand that off to the different models, and then run simultaneously. Gives you the ability to come to convergence faster and then ultimately get the inferencing in real time. And so there are some clever technologies that can be employed to help with this data management problem.
David, VA is making strides in AI, so maybe you can touch on that point.
Sure. Yeah. Well, actually, I was just reflecting on kind of the promise or the growth that we have had, right? Because 5-6 years ago, I'm manually working with the medical record data of millions of veterans and having to clean that, manually. And now we've become more sophisticated. The field has matured so that we're able to kind of address these things in, a better way. And what's very exciting is that now the VA is poised to leverage AI in a way that's I think unique, right? Because of our data and our mission and the delivery of healthcare. And so with the potentials for AI, we're actually working and collaborating with folks. And one of the things that we are doing in this is actually key about this data sharing. You're talking about this where kind of an iterative sharing of data and working together can help improve the quality of it. And one of the main things that we're doing right now in AI is a AI tech sprint. So this is a time-limited engagement on a specific use case. So we just did clinical trial matching for veterans, and this brought in academic and industry partners, and we provided data safely to these partners. And there's a back and forth as far as like understanding the data, understanding what the problems are, and with the data, and then sharing that with stakeholders that are a part of the VA, so veterans, stakeholders, leadership, VA leadership, giving feedback on the tools that this data is being used for. And so we're basically getting everyone together and working collaboratively to help basically leverage our AI tools. Yeah.
So each of your agencies have developed programs for fostering innovation in data management. Can you go into, in more specifics, what those efforts have been? What programs have you been involved in and are maybe looking forward to in the future? Chris?
Sure. I think one of the initiatives that we've really been focusing on is enterprise platforms for this type of capability. So from a technology perspective, how do we bring all of the data scientists, practitioners from across the agency together to help inform and build requirements for an enterprise data science type profile platform, both for analytic capabilities as well as machine learning capabilities, as well as RPA capabilities, right? These types of platforms can be constructed and be used by varying degrees of sophistication. So we're really focused on that, and then developing a pipeline for our data scientists, practitioners, people using this, so that if they discover new tools, new technologies, new capabilities, they have a mechanism to come to the technology team and say, have you thought about this tool? Have you thought about this technology? We want to be an enabler, and that's kind of what we're focused on.
And Oki, I know there's Accelerate.
Yes. Yes, so I'm not going to go into much Accelerate leverage blockchain technology. It was the first blockchain network to be authorized to operate in the federal government. But my next vision or next goal is to really automate the CDM program. Automating using blockchain to collect the logs. And the reason why is because a lot of when we want to do forensic investigation or root cause analysis, the logs are not there completely. We do a good work around the perimeter logs. But when you want to do forensic investigation, you have to go down deep into the OS logs, the application log, the database logs, virtualization log if you're in the cloud. What if the logs are there in an ecosystem where you don't have to do data call? When Homeland Security sent out a threat advisory and said, hey, is there this type of zero trust threat patterns or any trace of this? You don't have to do 2 weeks data call. You don't have to go ask Amazon or Azure, give me this log, try to dig down and do data call. You could have the log readily available. You could run AI against it in a matter of seconds. You could say, hey, Homeland Security, we're clear of this zero trust, 0-day virus. And once you have that log, you can be more proactive about cybersecurity. You could start doing threat hunting, the threat reconnaissance. You could start profiling threats. You could whitelist the normal user behaviors or system behavior and looking at anomalies, almost like how FBI profiles, criminals. You could start profiling, threat patterns. Why they're hitting us, in 2 o'clock in the morning. Why they're hitting us during the holidays. Why they're hitting us during the Super Bowl. So that's half of the CDM program, but the other half is the compliance, the ATO. I think we have a lot of innovation, and then we hit the ATO, and it's like 6-9 months later you lose all the momentum. I think I could condense that into 2 weeks. Instead of a 6-month process, you can condense it in 2 weeks, basically mimicking the TurboTax model. Think about it. We do a lot of pushing paper around in the ATO package. The controls, the informations are really just cutting and paste. But if you think about the TurboTax model, the evolution of filing taxes, right? Early 50s, 60s, I always say this. You file taxes, it takes you 2 weeks because it's held paper. You're collecting information from different places. Early 2000, you do it online. It'll take a couple of days. TurboTax, you can do it in an hour because data is being pulled from different data sets, aggregated, running RPA. In a matter of seconds, you could do it and then give you a confidence score. We could mimic that with the compliance ATO process. We have over 500 controls on the ATO process. AI could run through histories of system security plans, old packages, and guidelines of NIST. You could have confidence score for each control. If it's 85% and above, you could just, the auditor could just look at it and say, let me go check real quick, good to go. If it's under 50%, then I'll dig down deeper, That could drastically condense the process down to 2 weeks and get away from paper. And we could manage risk in real time in that place instead of, you're managing risk right now, not only you're doing check boxes, but you're waiting for 3 years to get re-ATO, you wait a year for a year-end assessment. Things have changed. Things shift daily. You have DevSecOps, you have Agile, your system security postures are changing daily, not every 3 years, not every year. So you could turn a system off in a matter of a minute when you know the security posture has dipped instead of waiting 3 years. And I think that's the key. I think that will change the landscape of cybersecurity for the whole federal government, not just HSS.
And David, perhaps you could go into the AI tech sprint that VA is involved in, how that's improving collaborations for this technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So these sprints that we're holding are going to also incorporate our VA data commons. So this is a safe environment where our collaborators come in and have safe access to our data that we can work with, where there are specific tools. So for example, genomic sequencing tools within that environment. This is kind of the platform of how we're coordinating with people. And so these AI tech sprints with the specific use cases that we're selecting really are an exciting way for collaboration to accelerate. And there are basically these tracks, because when you have the tech sprint, right, there's no kind of commitment, right? But it's a opportunity for a relationship to be built where you work with your academic or industry partner and they come to understand your problem in a better way because you're closely working side by side. You're working with the data, you're working on the issue, you're getting feedback, iteratively developing, and then you're working on issues such as like the data use agreements or how you can actually handle or bring them on. So what ends up happening is that you have basically an array of digital tools that get developed out that are AI driven, and you have a better selection that then ends up with kind of 3 tracks, right? So you come to the end of the sprint and you can have GIFs. This is one track. So you get to some industry partners understand the problem for the VA, and they say, the VA, now that we know you better and what you actually need, it's very easy for us to just give you X. So here. And that's helpful for us, right? So yeah, that's exactly what we need. That'll help us, right? Another track is CRADA, right? So we're going into a research project. And then there is like a pilot project, right? Where there can be support for that to develop it further. And the idea is that you come to that track, you kind of know how better to assist and address a problem. And that the solutions are much more refined. So it's not this kind of guessing game with a long time period. You work iteratively and quickly to understand, like, yeah, this isn't going to work, or oh, yes, this is absolutely going to work, and we want it, and we want to, send you on the pathway to kind of bring that solution right to develop the impact, because this is actually one of the key things for the tech sprints and all of the AI work that we're doing. Every AI project that we're working on right now is focused on having an outcome for veterans, right? This is not AI for AI's sake. Our mission, the work that we're doing, is to improve the health and well-being of our veterans. And so when we're developing our use cases, the issues that we're working on, how does this directly impact veterans? That's where we're starting at the end, okay? And then we work back from there and collaborate with everyone to direct them and facilitate the ability to do that. So that's the whole kind of broad picture of what the tech sprint tool mechanism that we're working on. That's what it looks like.
Great. So I know we have just about a minute left, so I want to see really quick, if there's any questions from the audience before I ask my last one. Right up here.
Yeah, is it on? Yeah, okay. Andrew Everson with the Federal Times. It's not on. Oh well. Andrew Everson with the Federal Times. Oki, you mentioned automating the CDM program. Is that different from the neural network that you guys are also working on?
Yes. Okay. So Jose is using RNN for tick traffic, basically network traffic. I think we need to dig deeper into the actual system, because inside a thread, there might be somebody using a thumb drive and just plugging in the computer or something. Somebody downloaded, malware or something. It's not going to get. It's going to get passed through the network. I think you need to go deeper. And AI needs a lot of data. And what has a lot of data? Logs. Because, logs, you're generating digital footprints right now, just sitting down here. Your Fitbit, your laptop, your phone is generating Fitbits. Logs has a lot of data. I think AI could make sense of the data and start being active instead of reactive on cybersecurity.
Any final thoughts?
I have one. As each one of my colleagues here discussed what they're doing within their agency, thought maybe it would be useful to update you on where industry sits, at least in terms of standardization and interoperability of models, right? And so if you start back at NIST and you look at the cloud computing architectural framework, prior to the release of that architectural framework, no one really knew what we were talking about when we said cloud. Now I sit here today and I can tell you IaaS, I can tell you PaaS, I can tell you SaaS. You understand the model, you understand the consumption, you understand the interoperability of each one of those platforms and frameworks. NIST recently published an RFI looking for information on what we could do in a similar fashion to develop a framework for AI systems or AI solutions. And so across the industry, we see multiple things that are occurring right now. There's the Open Neural Network Exchange Framework, all right? So that's one that's open source, available so people can exchange models. There's a hierarchical data format, HDF5, which gives customers an ability to create these information stores and then have them interchangeable amongst different models and different vendors. And then I would encourage everyone, if you haven't responded to NIST or haven't started to follow NIST, start to follow that AI framework, because that's going to be pivotal on how we generate better return on investment for any AI projects that you might want to engage in the future. Great.
Well, we are out of time, so thank you so much. These were great perspectives. I was glad to have you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amy. Thank you to the panel. Okay, our next panel is going to be a topic that's always very important to everybody in this room. We're entitling it "How to Buy AI." We are especially excited about this panel discussion because we're going to focus on a sprint that was created out of one of our previous events, the Acquisition Innovation CXO Tech Forum. So we always like to really put, the hope with these is to get multiple agencies and multiple leaders working together. So what our two panelists are going to come up here and talk a little bit about is how the GSA and DoD work together for a sprint of discovery on AI. So I'm going to I'll let them tell you more about it, but we're going to invite our moderator first, Andrew Underhill, Chief Technology Officer for GovernmentCIO. And he is going to be joined by Aint Government Acquisition Lead for GSA Centers of Excellence, as well as Michelle McNellis, also Acquisition Lead, GSA Centers of Excellence. So thank you. Take it from here.
Thank you, Mike. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Now I can hear myself. Fantastic. So thank you for joining us. Let's start with maybe telling us a little bit about why you're passionate in your role and the mission of the agency, or the piece of the agency.
Sure. Aint Government Acquisition Lead. I handle a lot of the program management, strategy-related work at Centers of Excellence. A big part of my role is, and part of my passion really, is to implement a lot of the agile methodologies that most of our project teams are using into the acquisition process itself, kind of, let's say, eat our own dog food mentality. I've been doing that for about 3 years now with Michelle, actually, a consistent team for the last 3 years.
Yes, it's been a lot of fun. Hi, everyone. I'm like Omid. I work at the Centers of Excellence.
Okay.
Just speak louder.
Okay, I'll speak louder. I'm also an acquisition lead, like Omid, for COE, and I've been doing government contracting for the last 10 years. And the last few years, Omid and I have been focusing on innovative procurements. And one of the exciting projects that we'll be talking about today is the Jake, but one of our first projects was procuring the first civilian bug bounty program at GSA.
Cool. Well, thank you. That was my next question. So, so tell us a little bit about how you are partnering with the other agencies to get some of these best practices and things that you've been working on. Mike gave the introduction that you'd recently done a discovery sprint. Maybe you can go into some detail and educate us all on, what that is, how we engage going forward.
Sure. So right now, GSA is in partnership with Jake, and Jake is the Joint Artificial Intelligence Committee. And so we are in a sprint engagement with them to help them with their acquisition process and building up their acquisition office. And so we're utilizing not only traditional methods, but we're trying to think outside the box to bring AI into the acquisition process itself. So we're right now just strategizing internally, and we're at the beginning stages. So one of the fun things that we're working on is figuring out how do we work not only in DoD, but also in our civilian partners. So we've partnered with GSA FedSim and DISADICO as our contracting offices to procure the next types of products that Jake will need.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting project, mainly not only because we are working with two different contracting shops, well, multiple really, but two primarily, right? The main kind of contracting shop that focuses on procuring innovative technology within DoD, and their counterpart here in GSA, which has been great in terms of not only sharing information with one another, but making sure that a lot of the kind of lessons learned that DoD is getting through some of their OTAs, other transactional authority, R&D related kind of buys that they're doing, where they're really on the forefront of learning what's out there in industry. And then we're able to kind of utilize a lot of that educational material, best practices that they're getting, and scale it up, let's say, standardize it in a sense so that it can spread among civilian agencies. And I think probably one of the more exciting parts of this partnership with Jake on the discovery front, as Michelle said, is we're trying to take a lot of what we're doing with Jake, with the national mission initiatives that they work with, and all of the AI that we are procuring for them. We're also hoping to procure for ourselves and make sure, like I said, eat our own dog food, right? Implement a lot of these technologies within our own process so that when a project team comes to us and says, hey, I need this in 2 weeks, we already have enough familiarity with the technology that they're buying so that we can assist intelligently in going out and getting the best possible value for not only ourselves, but our industry partners who are going to be working with us on some of these very exciting projects.
And I think one of the pain points that we feel in acquisitions is obviously the lead time. So this trying to automate some of the processes in some form or fashion is going to be the most important so that we can bring the most forefront technologies to the warfighter and also to our civilian agencies, because obviously technology changes so rapidly. There needs to be a way in the acquisition space to speed that up too.
Yeah. So, how are you using those innovations, within your internal processes to help people buy things like AI and RPA, or actually anything really? What innovations are you using and have implemented so far?
So one of the things I always like to take a step back and say to the folks as a contracting person is the reality is what we're trying to buy is a commercial product, correct? So let's not overthink it. If you're going to utilize the FAR, let's use the procedures that are available to us there that streamlines the practices and think of it as a commercial item so that we could make sure that we are rapidly deploying these things. Internally, Omi could speak to that a little bit more about what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think from a programmatic standpoint, one of the things I find to be really exciting is, let's say the last go-around in COE, we came out with the Discovery BPA, right? There was a lot of feedback that we gained to kind of generate what was a process that we found to be very effective, not only for hitting faster turnaround times, but for making sure that the vendors that we do, the contractors we do end up working with, are the type that we are actually looking for in this space. And what I really like is now we're working with our partners over at DoD to start going beyond processes and start to work on tools, right? This is one of the areas that I think that within acquisition in particular, we're so busy trying to satisfy the mission of our project teams that we haven't been able to get the opportunity to step back and look at what do we need to continue working to support our team members, right? Everyone else is getting all the benefit of this great technology, these great processes, great people that they meet at events like this. What about us? We are part of the team after all anyway, right? An agile cross-functional team. You need to include every piece of it. And that, I think, is a very nice thing that has come out of this engagement in particular. It's one of our first real big COE engagements where acquisitions was on the same level as the technology portion. And we get a lot of great support from our partners over at Jake. Will Roberts, the chief acquisition lead over there, has been a wonderful champion of these within DoD and a wonderful partner for us. And one of the things that I've adopted from him that I really enjoy is that he's viewing the implementation of technologies and processes like AI as a way to allow us to create more of a transparent co-opetition rather than a competition, right? Really get some kind of cooperation between us, industry, and even academia, since this is really technology on the forefront in all aspects of our economy, not just in, let's say, governmental aspect.
And with that, what they're trying to do is and what we always try to do is try to engage with industry in a way that, and one of the things that we were talking about earlier was a draft RFQ. So that is a great opportunity for us to get validation from our industry partners and make sure that if what we're saying we're going to buy is how you all actually procure it or how you all actually sell it, and by them I mean industry. So what we're trying to do is figure out ways to engage with our industry partners, looking for feedback, constant feedback. At least on the COE team, that's what we're always doing. We have an open RFI all the time and always trying to meet with our industry partners. How do we improve our processes? Because in the government, you can get very stovepipe and not very regimented in your practices. So it's always great to engage with industry on that.
Yeah. So we were talking about feedback, the feedback loop earlier, and it's great to hear that. Now, have you thought about using AI to help you, go through the feedback? And no, I'll stop there. I could go on.
I think we have. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah.
I'm sure Omid would have a better answer than I would. One of the things I'm trying to do internally is figure out a way that I could get like a knowledge repository of constant or frequently asked questions that we get internally just about procurements in general. And I'm not a technical person. I'm an acquisitions person. So I need to rely on my technical team to help me figure out a way once I get these types of questions, how do I make it so I could maybe create a chat bot or something along those lines to then have someone be able to answer it. So the hope is to get there. As of right now, on the acquisition side, we haven't, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
And I think that's another exciting opportunity that we have, again, to do some of the things that we know our project team members want to do, right? If we do get to a point where this tool we've been working on does get to a maturity level where we can roll it out into the public, guess what's the next iteration? Now we put it out for the RFQ Q&A period, We can get far more rapid back and forth, so you don't have to wait a week or two for the Q&A period to end and then get all the questions answered at the end. Oh, you know what? If I had seen that answer, I would have thought about this, We want that rapid fire feedback loop, as you mentioned, to be open as long as we can have it open, have it as responsive and dynamic as possible, because everything we can learn during that period is what we'll bake into the solicitations we end up putting out. And guess what? That's going to be the terms under which we are going to work together for a year. So let's, work together to make sure they're terms we both really enjoy and like working under. Because that really is going to be the key, I think, of what's the long-term success of not only AI in government, but just in general, these modernization efforts, the ability to make it stick.
And the reality is that you're looking at the acquisition team. There's one other individual on COE, so we definitely need some machine learning or AI type of capabilities to help us with those feedback loops so that we could be a little bit more rapid in our decision making.
Yeah. So we were talking about governance earlier in the discovery conversations. Do you have any thoughts on the role GSA may take in assessing the risk associated with AI, because it scares a lot of people, obviously?
I think the community of practice that we've stood up in GSA alongside our partners over at DoD and JAIC, the collaboration that we're getting here is really going to get a lot of great input from the different, let's say, stakeholders in that discussion. The folks that we do have in that community of practice, some of them are here in case you know about them. They're wonderful, very smart people who've come over from industry and are really giving us kind of that latest and greatest bit of information that they've learned, taking it into our kind of arena, working with folks like Michelle, myself, Will, the rest of the teams, to be able to come up with what is the best of both worlds, and not some kind of compromise that ends up worst of both worlds, right? I don't know, sorry for anyone who drives a minivan, but we joke, we don't want to be the minivan, right? Let's be a crossover. So that's really the positioning we're trying to take, is to really get those nuanced opinions from folks that are actually doing this, not just the ones that are sitting and reading papers and those kind of things, which is, research is very important, obviously. I'm not knocking it by any means, but what is going to be that practical outcome of what we do based on what the experience of the folks we work with have seen? And that's where, again, that industry feedback really comes into play, right? When a government employee leaves and goes join private sector, hey, their knowledge of what was internally in government is dying every day that they've been gone. Same thing goes with private sector, right? When they come and join us, their knowledge slowly decays. So we need to keep that kind of communication open. And again, on AI in particular, this goes beyond just industry, right? We want academia to be involved too. This is so new. There are very unique circumstances related to what decisions are made, what are the actual life and death consequences associated with those decisions. And, you really want to get as many perspectives as you can in those kind of things. And that's where I think this relationship between GSA and JAIC, the teams that we have working on this has been so monumental, because we have involved everybody from the end user to the middle people that are doing the buying to the key decision makers, all the way up at 3-star general level with Lieutenant General Shanahan and Administrator Murphy really giving us a lot of support to continue to push these efforts to make sure we provide the American taxpayer the best possible value in what we go out and buy.
Cool. We have 1 minute. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Di, I think that's a great point to end on, is that there's support through both agencies to try to figure out the best solution on developing AI strategies across both the civilian and DoD world. So I'm looking forward to our sprint. We're very early involved in the beginning processes, so we'll see how it evolves over the next several months.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Hamid, pioneers in buying AI and RPA and collaboration with other agencies. Thank you. We're out of time. Mike Hoffman, over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Fantastic. Great to have have you both. Let's all get to come together. Andrew, thank you as always. All right. So the next we're going to do another industry perspective. We wanted to give the chance to one of our partners, Blue Prism, to discuss some of their opportunities there. And so what we wanted to do is introduce Meredith Clinton to the stage. She is an innovation storyteller for Blue Prism. Some fun facts about Meredith Clinton. She also speaks Spanish and Chinese, and she's also a salsa dancer, all while having a 7-month-old child. So I'll let you take it from there. Okay? Thanks.
Just talking about innovation. So my name is Meredith Clinton, and I am with Blue Prism. We really pride ourselves on being the founders of RPA. We are so happy to be here. It is a privilege to speak to all of you, so thank you so much for coming and thank you for your time. So we have an innovation center at Blue Prism. This started about 7 months ago, so it is really in its infancy. And what I'm going to talk about today are the different things that we're doing as an innovation center and our purpose and kind of the first innovation that we're going to go to market with. So it's very exciting for us. So I'm going to start really basic, and I know that this crowd, there's a whole diversity of people that know all kinds of things, but I'm going to start with what is RPA. So RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation, and it's a software. It's not an actual robot. It sits inside of the computer, and it does what a human would do. So for example, if you have a stack of pages that are printed, 200 pages, RPA can go through them, even if they're handwritten, decide what it is, go through different applications on the computer and do what a human would do, whether it's filling out a sales order, a PO, all the way to very complex things, looking at video, things like that. So basically, RPA is taking the robots out of the human, so humans can do, higher level thinking activities. So I'm going to give you some examples that we work on. This is not the Innovation Center. This is Blue Prism as a whole. We have about 1,700 clients. 2 of them are Coca-Cola and Pfizer. So for Coca-Cola, they came to us and their HR and finance team said, we just want to optimize our operations. What can you help us with? So we looked, but not getting too technical, we looked at their processes and their operations, and we deployed RPA robots. And we took their time, from 8 hours a day to 24 hours a day. Robots, they don't take time off. They don't get sick. They can work all of the time. And so what they were able to do is free up that time for the rest of their workers without adding any extra headcount. And that is the power of RPA. Another example from a well-known client, Pfizer. They were doing a lot of manual reconciliation over and over and over again, and they just wanted to speed this up and be done with it. So we deployed our robots, and we saved them 220,000 hours. So that is just one activity where we employed RPA and got them immediate savings. So let's talk about the Innovation Center. So our center, what we do is we solve billion-dollar problems using RPA. Sometimes this is just normal uses of RPA. Sometimes it's with tech stacking. And what tech stacking is it's taking existing technologies, coupling it with RPA, and coming out with a completely new innovation. So if you think about something that happens with Google, how do you pair this with RPA to solve a billion-dollar problem? By the way, if you have a billion-dollar problem you would like to tell us about, our booth is over there. I'd love to meet you. I never meet a stranger. So what's one of the ones that we've come up with? So I want to tell you about 2 trends that have led us to our newest innovation. So the first one I'm going to talk about are the trends in technology, and the second one is the SAP S/4HANA migration. It's a long name. So the trends in technology. So if you look at the 10 most valuable companies in the world, 6 of those are tech companies. If you think about what's happening in companies today, and a lot of you know these examples already, Uber is a transportation company that has no cars. Airbnb is a hotel company that doesn't have a single hotel room. Amazon, until recently, is a retailer, and they never had a store. Well, until recently with Whole Foods. So you have 3 companies, transportation, hospitality, and retail. Those aren't the companies, they're tech companies. Everything is changing, and it's changing ever faster. 41% of jobs right now, and I'm sure that you guys have heard some of this, they're not going to exist anymore. They're going to be replaced by RPA, or they're simply not going to exist. If you have a kid and they're majoring in finance or accounting right now, they might end up doing something completely different for what they're trained for today. A good example, 20 years ago, I did marketing. When I graduated, there was no such thing as digital marketing. That's new. Bloggers, YouTube stars, Instagram influencers. This didn't happen. So what does the next 10 years look like for us? 500 million jobs will be created in the AI space in the next 10 years. This is where we are going. This is where the movement is happening. So to talk about what's currently going on, if you talk to recruiters, 70% of them say we can't fill the jobs because we simply don't even have the talent. The top right-hand corner, what are the two that they can't find out of the top 5? Software engineer, software architect. And then you look at what's the highest turnover rates? Software, it's technology. Why? Because everybody's recruiting from everybody else. There's not enough to go around. It's like the musical chairs all over the world with software architects. The bottom right-hand graph, this is correlative data. But if you look at that, people are working into much later into their lives, right? So this has a multitude of reasons. But if you look at it from a software perspective, you look at it from a legacy software perspective, guess what? All of those softwares that happened in the 80s and in the 90s, what's happening to those workers? They want to retire. So they're working later and later, but you're not going to have these people to run these legacy systems anymore. So what are you going to do? So I want to switch over now completely to the SAP, S/4HANA migration. So when you look at SAP, it is just basically this massive software program that runs all kinds of software, from HR to inside of companies, HR, operations, sales, CRM. It's basically an ERP system, touches all kinds of things in business. 77% of the world's financial transactions run on an SAP system. Guess what? SAP is upgrading. It's going to S/4HANA. Right now, mainly, it's switching over from ECC, which is the older, what's now going to be the legacy system, over to S/4HANA, okay? That means in 2025, SAP will look at all their ECC customers and say, we're no longer going to service that. You're going to have to service that someplace else. Well, that costs money. So you're going to have a choice. SAP users will face this choice. Do they migrate and go through what is going to sound like a painful migration to migrate everything over to take advantage of the technology? Or do they opt to pay a premium for additional support? They're going to have to pick their poison. On top of this, like we just covered, there's already a shortage of software engineers and SAP consultants. So what could possibly go wrong? And that's why we said, hey, this sounds like $1 billion problem. Let's try to solve this with robots. And that's what the Innovation Center has done. So again, to look at this, I'm not going to go through the whole infographic here, but in the bottom left-hand corner, just to give you an idea, there's 42,000 customers on ECC right now who have not migrated yet. We have one oil and gas customer. It's going to take them 10 years to migrate. If all of these 42,000 customers had 15 consultants to work on their projects, it would take them 108 million days to complete. It's impossible. It cannot be done with humans alone. That's why you have to think about humans and digital when you're thinking about human resources and talent. There's human talent and there's digital talent. So here's how we're solving it. So the left-hand robot, he's the normal robot. Pfizer and Coca-Cola come to us with a problem. We say, okay, let's look at your processes. We put this robot, we teach it what to do, and the robot goes out and synthesizes this information, right? The new robot we have on the right is digital talent. We know that there are 41,000 companies that need this. So what we did is we said, okay, we're going to have a robot that out of the box can already help out with the SAP for HANA migration. So we already have something that helps it out. It's an accelerator. Right now it has 400 transaction codes, or T codes. And what this does is it speeds up the process in the migration, 20 to 30%. And if you have the old system, ECC, it still works to accelerate that. So if you're not upgrading, it still works. If you want to upgrade, this is going to be a tremendous help in your upgrade. We're hoping that in the next 6 months, we have 3,000 T codes that are going to speed up this process. And if you already have migrated over to the S4 HANA system, we're going to be able to help out with that. It's going to make huge inroads in your software systems by using RPA. So this is the first innovation that we've come to the market with. We're going to be coming back with a lot more, so I hope you guys stay tuned. And if you have any legacy systems that you would like to talk about, or you have a billion-dollar problem you think that we could help with, please let us know. And thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Meredith. Awesome. Great job. Okay. Well, so we have one last session to go before we can go to lunch. But before we do that, we have one last trivia question as well, and one last ticket giveaway. So I saved my favorite for last. It goes with the Spy Museum theme here. So if everybody, without further ado, are we ready to go? So the question is, in World War II, MI6 cracked the German Enigma code, which was thought to be virtually unbreakable. This development had to be kept secret, of course. How many people knew of the breakthrough and managed to keep silent? So the question is, how many people knew of the breakthrough and managed to keep silent of Enigma? All right. 60 seconds. 60 seconds. We got Chris. Do we have Alex? Marco? Yep, there you go. Alex actually has the tickets now, too. All right. All right, let's jot those. Yes, go for it. To be kept through. How many people knew of the breakthrough and managed to keep it silent? So how many people knew that the code was broken but didn't tell anybody? All right. Last ones before we invite Gerard to the stage. All right. While you guys are picking that up, I will. James, can you remove one chair? Okay, thank you. All right. All right. So, without further ado, do we got all the answers in? All right, great. So we'll announce it after this, right before as part of the closing remarks. So the final session we have is one of the ones I'm most excited for, because we kind of hinted at one of our first sessions. The congressman talked about some of the silos that have been created in government. The individual we are going to invite to the stage next is sole pursuit right now is breaking down a lot of those silos and allowing federal agencies to work together. So we've named this Leading the Community of Practice, and I'd like to introduce to the stage Gerard Broderick, Chief Financial Officer for GSA, as well as Amy Kluber again, our Managing Editor for GovernmentCIO Media Research. Thank you very much.
All right. So I'm excited about this discussion because in many ways GSA is leading the charge in RPA implementation, and right here with me is the one leading the office that kind of kickstarted that effort. So how did the GSA Chief Financial Officer Office get started with RPA?
Yeah, so I went to a conference, and the conference, one of the sessions was on RPA, so I said, okay, I'm excited about this. I went back to the office, had a full-time job, forgot about it for a few months, right? So finally was sitting with someone in TTS, one of my staff members, and I just said, and they were talking about it, and I said, we just have to get it done. So I set a very aggressive goal, 100 days. I wanted us to put an automation using RPA into production in 100 days and to work with our IT organization and everything we needed to do, right? And I didn't know if that was realistic, but I just felt I was way behind all these other agencies because they were talking about it. And I said I need to get started and start quickly.
So since joining GSA in 2014, you have transformed the finance office and standardized business processes, among other efficiencies. What part has automation played in that effort?
Yeah, so when I started GSA and I came out of the private sector, spent 25 years in the private sector, and GSA had pulled all of their finance personnel from regions under the CFO office, and they're trying to figure out what to do with them. At one point, there was over 900 staff in the finance organization. So I was hired as someone outside of government that could come in and help them how to decide how to make this organization very effective and efficient. And so that was my charge. So, and I wanted to get things done very quickly. So technology was not part of this initially. And the reason is because, I just felt that big system investments take time, and that'll be years. And so I can ask for millions of dollars, and I was supposed to take spending down, not up. And the deal is spend a lot of money, and then 5 years maybe have a benefit. And I didn't want to do that right away. I wanted to make the organization better today, tomorrow, next week. So I focused, we like to talk about people and process. I focused on culture, reorganized the team in about 6 weeks. I focused on process. We had 11 regions with finance personnel all doing things differently with the same set of responsibilities. So created 4 zones, same structure, standardized about 45 processes. So that's the first half of the story. So that has worked out very well in terms of efficiencies and audit performance and all the things that are fairly important. But the last 18 months, I've really been able to take on technology and automation. And the one of the big areas is RPA. And the thing that's exciting about RPA is that you can get immediate payback if you know how to deploy it efficiently and effectively and quickly. And so that's really what the last 18 months has been about. There's some software as a service applications we're looking at, but really for me it's been a play in RPA. And the organization's excited about it. No one's scared of it. And in fact, when I visit finance teams in the field, they suggest applications to me. And we are now doing it. We got our one application done pretty quickly. We're now doing it we started doing it right away for the Public Building Services, one of our business units. 75% of my current pipeline is outside the CFO office. We're doing automations for HR, administrative services, TTS, OMA, as well as PBS. So it's been an exciting technology adventure, and it's really about getting results quickly.
How have you determined what part of your budget to allot to automation?
Well, within so I'm the overall budget officer for GSA, but within the CFO budget, I made this a priority, but I actually did it by the first year by employing folks part-time. So we went out and asked for volunteers to take training to learn how to do RPA development. Had 50 volunteers, trained 12. But they actually learned to do the coding, and then we took a Six Sigma process expert to help us and some other expertise. So I did it. See, initially when you think about investment, you don't know how much to put on the table. You don't know what the velocity is, how quickly this is going to happen. So I didn't want to try to extract a lot of my budget, but I was able to take some contract money and able to take some staff and figure out how this is going to work. And probably the first 12 months, all of our progress was made with folks who are either detailed or part-time. As far as an overall agency budget, we do not go and say this much is for innovation, but in using some of my private sector experience as well, if you have good ideas and innovation that are going to make a difference, and as a CFO, if you can deliver results sometime in the short term, next 3 years, I'll get excited about that. And we'll find ways to fit that into our budget. And we need leaders in the organization that can come forward with those ideas. And so it's a little bit bottoms up, but if there are good ideas, and sometimes you have to, and I'm speaking a little more private sector here, you have to invest in things that you're not sure how well they're going to work. But you got to try these things. You may have 4 or 5 things you try, but the key is not to put all your money on the table for one thing and say this is the absolute right answer, but to have a little mixture of investments. And I, some of that can come into play in government. That's a private sector mentality. But when I think about investments, it really is in government as well. Works by those that have the good ideas coming forward with the investments, and then I put my private sector hat on and say, okay, what can you deliver with your investment? And if there's a good case for that, there's always some uncertainty, then you figure out a way to fund it in your budget.
How do you measure progress or success with automation or RPA just specifically?
Yeah, well, with RPA specifically, one of the things, so you'll hear a lot of agencies that have a pilot, have an application, very excited about it, right? But what I'm looking for is the number of automations and the capacity you create. So not necessarily savings, but capacity. So at GSA, we've done 33 that are implemented, and we've created about 70,000 hours of capacity. And I've got a pipeline of close to another 40 that are another 100-some thousand hours of capacity. So you look at the capacity you can create. You also look at capabilities. From an audit perspective, RPA can actually be cleaner because you do have a record of what you've done. You can do things that you were not able to do before, like running reports. So one of our first automations was an application where the report was generated once a month, and it was cleaning up the $30 billion of revenue we get from other agencies. So we do that on a constant basis, but we can now run the report every day if we want, and we get real-time information. So that's a benefit that outside of capacity, there's real value to having that information on a real-time basis. So I look at what the results are. I look at if you have an office, what the capabilities of that office is process improvement part of what you do? Do you help re-engineer the process when you do these applications? Also look at whether you have an enterprise platform in your operations and whether you're supporting all of the a broad slice of the agency or it's just your office. So RPA programs and agencies are going to evolve, and we're trying to by identifying a maturity model and identifying the things that will make a more impactful organization successful. We're trying to push agencies towards those things that will really make a difference. And it's really results, it's a capabilities, your program, and it's your overall process and operations, the platform plus the formal processes you have with your IT organization for ATOs, security, privacy, those kinds of things. So you have to have all that set up and have a good relationship, and that has to be working well.
Now, where does the community of practice come in here?
So I felt like I was behind other agencies. So I said, okay, let's get a lot done. And so, we agencies heard about how many automations we're able to put in place and how quickly we're able to do it. So we probably had 30 to 40 agencies wanting to meet with us and say, okay, how'd you do this? So if I have an hour meeting with you or 2-hour meeting with you, or my staff does, we can't exactly teach you how to do something. So the community of practice was something that we set up in April, May of last year, and the objective was to bring together government agencies that wanted to learn about RPA, but also that were successful in RPA. So the two things that we wanted to do, one was to solve problems that are common across government and come up with solutions, and the second is educate agencies that move along the curve. So this is not we set it up out of the CFO office, but this is an effort that the leading agencies in RPA, so it's parts of DoD, Army, Treasury, NASA, NSF, DHS. They all are further down the path, and they've worked through some of the challenges. So what we're working on right now is a playbook that will identify some of the solutions to some of these challenges depending on what stage of maturity you're at. So it really is the other leaders in government coming together, sharing their knowledge, identifying solutions, and then we're hosting webinars and forums. Tomorrow we have one on technology, but a couple weeks ago it was on finance use cases. But for me, it's exciting because it's other results-oriented folks across government that have made progress in RPA, that are coming up with solutions, and everybody that's excited about it. So right now we have over 700 members and 50 agencies as part of the COP, and we started it 6-7 months ago.
And what have been some of the challenges that the agencies have tackled as part of the COP, and maybe how has the COP accomplished or overcome those?
Well, the COP we're hoping to help agencies overcome this, but the challenges are, you can generalize change management, but this is something that's new, and so when it's new, it's easy to be cautious, right? I've had some applications people suggested to me that I've said, I don't want to do that, because if we have a problem, then the program shuts down for a while, we reevaluate and things like that, right? So you have to balance your risk versus your need for results, and it's easy to be very conservative on everything. So that's a key factor. But because this is so new, it's easy. You need to work with people that are solution oriented, and we've had a great relationship with our IT organization. They are cautious, which is fine. And we've come up with solutions for how we want to implement these, and they have a say in the process before we start working on a bot, and they also have a say before we put it into production. And so we have that set up with them. Have a weekly meeting with them, and we didn't set up the process. It's in play. As we learn more, we'll modify that process. But we're also looking at the process at other agencies to learn from them as well.
And maybe stepping back, looking into your industry days, what have been the challenges in coming into the government sphere?
Government is similar to industry, but the difference in industry is it's okay to take some risks and have some failures, right? So I'm trying to bring a little bit of that government to my organization, and I tell people a few mistakes and failures are okay, because I want success. I want outstanding success. And so if that means some things don't work out the way we want, I'm willing to live with that. And that's changing the risk culture. And you think about RPA, if everybody wanted to be tremendously conservative, then you would move at a snail's pace. And so you have to get people comfortable. And, I'm actually willing to take a little bit of risk to get some results. And that's why if you think about the RPA thing, we did it with part-time folks, and I didn't know how much to put on the table as far as investments. I said, okay, I'll just cover it out of my budget and redeploy some assets. And so we learned what it would take, what we need in place. We now are investing in that, but it was managing that investment, managing the risk, and I think that's one of the things that's a bit different about government, but it's part of the culture that if you want to get stronger results, then there has to be the appetite for a little bit of risk.
So GSA, you mentioned, has like 33 bots currently in production, and a number of others that you're still being looked at. Go into maybe some of the successful ones, or are there a couple that you can highlight that are in production that maybe have overcome significant challenges?
Yeah, so if I think about an IT organization, if they were doing this versus what we're doing, right? So an IT organization, you get your requirements, and you go back and forth with users. The requirements are spelled out. Here, we have to teach organizations what RPA is about, and then we have to help them pick an application, and then we have to help them re-optimize the process, and then we have to document the process, and then we go do our work, and then we come back out and we test it and show them what's going on. So that's a whole requirement skill set that's outside of the normal development process, because the development in RPA is, because of the software, there's a learning curve, but it's really all this work you have to do with different parts of the organization to get the information you need. So some basic bots are things like simply reminding contract officers to pay their invoices. And if they don't pay their invoices, then their supervisor is copied on a couple days later, right? So it's a process that we could probably do manually. We don't have a problem with that at GSA, but what you're doing is you're stopping someone else from having to do that work, and you're making it easy. And there are probably some situations where the contract officer is on sick leave or something's going on, and people know what's going on. So that's a very simple bot. Some of the more complicated bots are or in contracts and liquidating and ending contracts where you've spent all the money and cleaning up that information. Or in our case in leasing, we have leases and we have to get that process started. And there's information that has to come out of various systems. And so we pull all that information for the contracting officers. Same thing on the invoice side. There's information that has to be pulled out of different systems for some of our building managers to put forth their invoices to be paid. So we automate that for them. It's a process where they get that information and they can simply look at it and say, I got the service and I recognize the charge, and they can approve it, and there you freed up some of their time.
So you have also said before that the RPA Center of Excellence is not meant to set policy. Where does policy fit in?
Policy is within the agency, but there's interpretation of that policy, right, when you're looking at something new like RPA. So I think the community of practice will help agencies work together and share how they're doing things. So policy is at an agency level. Certainly anything that we can help get decided at a broader CIO level across government, I'd love to do that, right? And I think that may be an opportunity going forward. But today, some of the policy decisions are within the agencies, and everybody has a different way to balance the time they take to assess something that's new and determine what the right solution is. And so we're trying to help agencies move along in some of those policy decisions.
And what advice would you have for agencies who are looking into getting started in RPA?
Yeah.
Where can they start?
So if you're getting started, you're behind, so catch up. But I would, you can, we used an industry outside firm to help us with their expertise, right? So if you know nothing about it, go to either another agency or someone that can help you figure out how to get started, how to do processes. But pick some things that are simple and be aggressive in your goals. And we're going to issue our playbook probably early January, maybe sometime in December. But it really is what all these leaders across government have worked together on. And the last 6 to 8 weeks, my office is reviewing and editing and trying to make it something that's useful. But we're going to put that out there. But I think there are ways that you can learn about some of the solutions you need to think about within your agency. But pick some things that are simple, and just cross the finish line. Learn what it's about, right? Because I didn't, when you thought about this, I don't know if we needed to invest millions of dollars or build a big platform or what we needed to do, but I just said, let me figure it out and let me get some of this done. And so if you're starting, you just need to get started, to build something, develop that relationship with your IT organization, think of some simple applications. And one of the community of practice deliverables is a use case inventory. So we brought together finance leaders to talk about this. We want to do it with acquisition and HR, but the kinds of applications that are being used in these functions, we're going to put them in some type of vehicle where we're not as interested in sharing the coding as just the applications. So you can come in and say, okay, here's one. I understand what that is. It's relatively simple. Let me see if I can get that in place and work it through my agency, and that'll help you get started.
Well, we are out of time, but
Okay.
thank you. That kind of flew by, didn't it?
Okay.
This was great. It was awesome to learn more about the COP and GSA and all the great things you're doing.
I'm very excited about it. I mean, I really think that the 2 million civilian employees we have, 7 to 8 hours per employee on average, will generate over $1 billion of available capacity for the federal government. So it's just a huge winner, and the individuals that have been able to do this at GSA are excited about it. And there's so many folks, so many agencies that want to make RPA happen at their agency, and they just need to know how to do it efficiently and effectively. So thank you, Amy.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you both. Okay. Well, that concludes. Wait, hold on a second. The trivia. We do have the trivia winner to announce. So the question was, nobody got anywhere close to the right answer. Just so everybody knows, it was actually a parsing of who was actually the least wrong. So the question was, in World War II, MI6 cracked the German Enigma code, which was thought to be virtually unbreakable. This development had to be kept secret, of course. How many people knew of the breakthrough and managed to keep silent? So The right answer was 15,000. The winning answer was 50 to table 6. I think there was like 4, 5, 9, 50 was the closest. So table 6, where's table 6? Right over there. All right, you guys are the winners. He has the tickets. All right, so thank you very much. So with that said, thank you so much to everybody for joining us. We're going to conclude here with a lunch. I just took a look at the lunch. It looks delicious. I've been to a lot of these events like this, and the food looks fantastic. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you got a chance to learn a lot with a lot of the different speakers from all the different federal agencies, the congressman, having Dr. Liu from Johns Hopkins. What a fantastic morning. For our next CXO Tech Forum, that's going to be in February. We're still finalizing where it's going to be. There's a very good chance it might be here. But the focus for that one is going to be on health IT. So keep a lookout for that. Hopefully everybody here can join us. I'm sure there's going to be some AI and RPA issues that we're going to talk about as well. So thank you so much for everyone who joined us, and let's have lunch. We also have quite a few speakers still here. So thank you very much. All right. Bye.